The paradox is the spoiled ending. You're watching a movie. It is beautiful, subtle, mysterious. You don't know where it's going, but you feel something brewing. And then, before Act 3, someone tells you how it ends. Just one sentence, just enough. Death, betrayal, an unexpected twist. Suddenly, the mystery vanishes. You already know what will happen. You keep watching the movie, but now it's different. All the scenes seem empty now. Each moment loses importance, tension dissipates, and something deeper happens. You begin to feel that the journey in itself has changed, although nothing has changed. It is the same movie, the same story, same characters, but now you know it. And that knowledge changes everything. This is the paradox of a revealed ending. The tension between fully living the present and knowing how it ends. Everything starts with a simple question. If you knew the end of your story, could you live it the same way? It's not just about movies. It's about life. It's about time. It's about the unbearable weight of knowledge, and how knowing the end can eclipse the meaning of all that comes before. Let's imagine more than a spoiler. Let's imagine a machine, a perfect oracle. It tells you with certainty how your life will end. Not only the date, not only the cause, but how. Who will be there, what you will feel, what you will regret, and what you will become. Now you wake up the next morning, the same life continues, the same decisions, the same people, but now you know how everything is going to end. Do you still care? Can you fall in love again? Can you fight for something knowing how everything fades? Can you be surprised? Or does the script begin to show? Does everything become acting? This is where the paradox deepens, because we already know how the story ends. Not the details, but the truth behind it. You're going to die. All your loved ones, too. Time is a one-way street. And yet you forget it. You allow yourself to forget. Because if you lived with that truth in every breath, knowing that nothing lasts, maybe you would never start anything. Maybe you would be paralyzed by futility, absurdity, or pain. So we cling to two truths. Everything has an end, but we must live as if it weren't so. And somehow both are necessary. It's not about denial. It is survival. It is how the mind makes sense of certainty. Because if the end is fixed, then the power does not reside in what happens, but in how you experience it, in how you behave, and how you choose to. But the paradox comes back. Does knowing the end cheapen the moments or make them more valuable? If you knew it was the last time you were going to hold someone's hand, would you let go sooner to soften the pain? Or would you squeeze harder, knowing its worth? Is foreknowledge a gift or a curse? Some say it's better not to know, that hope resides in uncertainty, that not knowing allows possibility, spontaneity, that surprise makes joy real. But others argue the contrary, that if you know how it ends, you can concentrate, that you can spend less time chasing and more time being present. You can love more deeply knowing how rare it all is. You can forgive more easily knowing how brief everything is. You can stop waiting for the right moment because you have looked at the calendar and it is shorter than you thought. So what is it really? Is a spoiled ending a blessing or a tragedy? It depends on how you see it. Some people waste decades pretending the end does not exist. They postpone joy. They delay expression. They plan for a future that never comes. Others live as if they had read the last page, not with sadness, but with urgency, with clarity, with elegance. And perhaps the difference is not knowledge, but acceptance. Here is a final twist. Even if you do not know the end, you act as if you did. You assume that the people you love will always be there, that your health will remain, that there will be more time. Therefore, you put things off. You say, I will call them later. I will write it someday. I will love them more when I am ready. But if you had read the end, really read it, would you still wait? Would you still hold yourself back? Would you still assume there is time? The paradox of the spoiled ending is not about how the story ends. It has to do with what knowledge of the end does to the story itself. You want mystery, but you need meaning. And meaning is not found in surprise, but in attention, in presence, in awareness. So maybe the answer is not to erase the end. Maybe the answer is to live as if you knew it, but without letting it steal your wonder. To let the end shape what is at stake, but not the spirit. You are sitting in the theater of your life. The final scene is already written, but the lights have not gone out yet. The music is still playing, and you are still here. You still have time. You still have a scene to perform. So you take a breath. You go on stage, and you recite your lines, as if they'd never been pronounced before. The paradox of being understood. You're talking to someone. You're saying the words. You choose them carefully, and even so, you feel it. They don't quite understand it. Not as you feel in your body, not as the memory clings, not as the idea twists in your mind. They try. You try, but the gap is still there. And at that moment, however close you are, you feel alone. Not because they don't love you, but because there is something inside you that remains untranslated. This is the paradox of being understood. The impossible longing to be completely known and the silent knowledge that no one else can live inside your mind. Let's start with language. You use it every day to express yourself, to connect, to explain. But language is a tool, not a window. It gesticulates, points, suggests, but can never fully convey what you feel. You say, "I'm tired." "You miss here." It was precious. But those words do not convey the intensity of the feeling. They do not convey the pain, the texture, the history. And so, something is always lost when telling it. You say one thing, and they hear another. Not because they are wrong, but because they are not you. Now think about your memories, your childhood, your thoughts at 2 in the morning, your patterns of fear, the strange logic of your dreams. No one has ever been there with you. Not exactly. They have seen versions. They have touched the surface. But the complete form, the depth, that part is only yours. And you can explain it, but you cannot transmit it. You can share the outline, but not the weight. And so you carry with you pieces of yourself that no one else can have, however much they want it, however much you try to give them. That's where the paradox arises. You long to be fully understood, but for someone to fully understand you, they would have to become you. And if they became you, they would no longer be independent. They could no longer love you as another person. Because the distance, the space between your minds, is what makes the connection real. And that same space is what makes perfect understanding impossible. Some say that this is what art is for, to close the gap, to translate the untranslatable. And yes, a song, a book, a gesture can make you feel seen. Suddenly, someone else is describing something you have never said out loud. And for a moment, the isolation dissipates. You feel known, but even then, it's just a pinch, a shared edge, not everything. And when the song ends, the distance returns. Others say that it is not necessary for you to be fully understood, just enough. Someone who captures your rhythm, who knows when you are spiraling, who recognizes the look in your eyes before you speak. And that is true. That is love. But even in love, there are rooms in your heart that no one enters. Not because you hide them, but because they don't have a key, because it was not their place to have it. And so, even in connection, there is loneliness. Even in closeness, there is space. And here is the paradox in its fullness. You are more yourself in the places where no one can reach. And yet, you spend your life hoping someone will. You long for someone to tell you, "I see everything. I feel it exactly the same as you." But if that happened, if they could feel everything exactly the same, they would no longer be another person. They would be you. And you don't want that either, because then there would be no one left to see you, no one to surprise you, no one to take your hand and tell you, "I don't fully understand, but I'm here anyway." And maybe that's what you really need. Not a perfect understanding, but presence. Someone who sees part of you and stays. Someone who listens to your confusion and doesn't try to fix it. Someone who says, "You don't need to translate everything for me to care." Because love is not understanding. It is commitment. It is being present without having total access and saying, "Even in the parts that I don't understand, I will stay." So where does that leave you? It leaves you with a strange truth. You will never be fully understood, neither completely nor perfectly. And that is not a failure. That is what makes you real. What makes you complete? What makes your inner world yours? It also means that you will never fully understand another person. And that is also sacred because it gives you something to explore, to ask, to witness without possessing, to love without dissecting. You sit with someone you care about. He tells you something difficult to explain. You don't fully understand it, but you don't interrupt him. You don't fill the silence. You just listen. You nod your head. You let the space be what it is. And in that space, the other person feels something better than understanding. He feels safe. And maybe that's the point. Not to solve the other, but to walk together as we carry the mystery. The paradox of infinite choice. It is your free day, without obligations, without deadlines, without demands. You wake up and realize that today you can do whatever you want. Read, write, call a friend, take a walk, build something, start something. You imagine what you will do, and then the hours begin to pass. A bit of scrolling, some tasks, some scattered thoughts, and suddenly it is late. You have not done what mattered to you. You were free, and nevertheless, you did not choose it. Why? This is the paradox of infinite choice. The strange truth is that the more free you are, the more difficult it is to choose anything. Let's begin with a small example. You're looking at a menu. There are too many options. You are paralyzed and turn the pages over and over. You order something, but then wonder if you chose well. This is called choice overload, when the abundance of options overwhelms decision-making. But in life, this does not only happen at restaurants. It happens every day. You could spend time on hundreds of things. So you do none intentionally. You let yourself go. You act by default. Not because you do not care, but because you do not know how to choose. This is where the paradox deepens. You believe that freedom is key to meaning. That if you had enough time, enough resources, enough space, you would finally create, explore, start. But when freedom arrives, it paralyzes you because freedom without structure becomes fog. It dissolves the impulse. It makes all options seem equally distant and equally exhausting. So, instead of doing what matters, you do what is easy, what is close, what requires less from you. And then you wonder, why didn't I choose what I like? There's a silent pain in this, because the things that matter most usually require the greatest effort. They require concentration, patience, risk. And so, when everything is within your reach, you instinctively avoid them. You say, I'll do it later. You wait for a perfect state of mind, a perfect spark, a perfect reason. But perfection never comes, and the choice remains intact. Not because you did not have time, but because you did not have clarity. This is the paradox in all its extension. Freedom only makes sense when it's directed. Choice is only powerful when accompanied by intention. Without that, it is noise. It is drift. It is a loop of small decisions that little by little erase the most important ones. And you could spend a whole life free to choose, but without really choosing. Think of all the paths that you could take, all the lives that you could live, the jobs that you could perform, the cities to which you could move, the art that you could create, the love that you could cultivate. They're all open, but only in theory, because you cannot live all of them. You have to choose. And choosing means closing all the other doors. That hurts, even when it is the right thing. And to avoid that pain, you get stuck. You stay at the door, without leaving, but without entering. Just waiting and imagining until, in the end, the door closes anyway. Not with a slam, but in a whisper. So what is the answer now? How can you overcome this? Start here. The goal of freedom isn't to keep all doors open. It is about finding courage to choose one. Saying, this is my path now. Saying no to 1,000 things to be able to say yes to one with total conviction. This does not limit you. It frees you because your energy is no longer dispersed. Now your choices start to make sense. You also learn to protect your intention because choices fade. They are eaten by distractions, noise, and comfort. And so you create rules, limits, rituals, not to restrict freedom, but to activate it. Structure is not the enemy of choice. It is the way that gives reality. And perhaps the most important thing is that you stop waiting to be prepared. You stop waiting for certainty. Because the most difficult thing about choosing is not the risk of error. It is the fear of being responsible, of saying, this is mine, this matters to me. And when you say that, you move in a different way. Not by pressure, but with clarity, alignment, and love. You return to your day. You still have time. Not everything, but something. Enough. Breathe. Name what matters to you. You say, this is what I choose today. Not forever. Just for now, just really. And at that moment, freedom ceases to be fog and becomes focus. The paradox of a life without witnesses. You walk through a field at dawn. The air is fresh. The grass is wet. The sky begins to clear. There is no one with you. You don't carry a phone in your pocket. There are no cameras. No voices heard nearby. You stop to enjoy the moment. And then you think, if no one knew I was here, would this moment still matter? It is not vanity. It is not a cry to call attention. It is something deeper. The silent fear that experiences no one sees are not real. This is the paradox of a life without witnesses. The tension between our inner life and the external confirmation we crave. You feel, you think, you live. But if nobody sees it, if nobody remembers it, did it happen? Have you existed? Let's begin with a question. Why do we document? Why do we write diaries, take photos, share stories, build legacies? Because a part of us does not trust memory. A part of us does not believe an experience is complete until someone else has seen it. Even if that someone is just a future version of ourselves, it's not enough to excite us. We want someone to know that we get excited so we can say, I was here. I felt this. It mattered. But if nobody listens to you, do feelings resonate or fade? You have cried alone. You have laughed out loud in an empty room. You have danced where nobody saw you in those moments you felt alive. But then didn't you want to tell someone to prove it, to relive it through their eyes? And when you couldn't, the memory began to fade faster. Not because it meant less, but because it had nowhere to land, no place to be witnessed. And little by little, even your own mind stopped reproducing it. That is where the paradox flourishes, because your most intimate moments are often the most significant. But the less they are witnessed, the more unreal they seem. They live in the folds of time, unregistered, unshared, unvalidated, like footprints in water. Present, and then they disappear. Here is the paradox in its full extension. The deeper your inner life is, the harder it is to prove it existed. You could spend your days writing poems that nobody reads, singing songs to yourself, creating art in secret, forgiving people in silence, loving someone who never knew you, and all of it would be real, but none of it would be remembered. Then you wonder, what is the value of a life that leaves no trace? Some say that the value is in being, not in being known. That the flower of the forest continues to bloom even if nobody passes by. That the sunset is still beautiful even if it is not photographed. That good deeds still matter even if nobody thanks you. But the human heart is not a forest. It is not indifferent to being seen. It yearns to be known, to be understood. Not because that makes a moment real, but because it makes you feel real within it. Now imagine a life lived completely in silence. Without diaries, without letters, without names spoken aloud, without memories preserved. You live, you feel, you die, and nobody ever knows that you have been here. Not in the future, not in history, not even in rumors, just a life that's gone. Was it a full life? Would you live differently if you knew with certainty that nobody would remember you? That nobody would transmit your stories? That no trace would remain? Would you still be kind? Would you still forgive? Would you still love deeply? If nobody saw it, would you still want to be good? That is where the paradox deepens. Because in the absence of witnesses, you are only left with integrity, only your own reflection, your own silent truth. And perhaps that is the most honest version of yourself. Not the one that is shown, not the one that remains documented, but the one that fulfills a promise nobody will hear. Who chooses gentleness without recognition, who suffers with dignity and without applause, who loves without being loved. Perhaps that is what makes a life without witnesses sacred. Because in that stillness, you are no longer acting. You are simply being present. Even so, there is pain in it. Because we are narrators. We are social beings. We are echoes built to bounce off each other, to leave footprints, to be remembered. And the idea of fading completely, not just dying, but being erased, is unbearable, like disappearing before leaving. And so we search, record, tell, mark trees, inscribe names in stone, build legacies, not only to endure, but to demonstrate that we have lived. But the paradox does not disappear. It only sharpens because even stories fade. Even names are forgotten. Even the greatest lives dissolve over time. So perhaps the only way to move forward is to stop needing witnesses. Let go of the echo and trust that it is enough to exist, even if for a brief, invisible moment. That life does not need to be known. To be real, that joy does not need to be shared. To be true, your existence, brief, silent, without witnesses, still matters. Even if no one ever sees the proof, you walk through the field again. The sky is still open. The ground under your feet is still soft. No one is watching you. No one will know. And you smile anyway, because at that moment, you remember that. You were here, and that was enough. The paradox of arrival. You strive, fight, work for something that matters. Perhaps it is success, peace, love, or a feeling that you cannot define. You imagine it clearly, a point in the future where everything will make sense. When the work will be done, the questions answered, the weight lifted, that place of arrival. You don't know exactly what it will be like, but you know how you will feel. Stillness, satisfaction, fullness. And so you keep going, chasing the moment when you will finally be done. But every time you get closer, it moves away. This is the paradox of arrival. The painful contradiction between our search for fullness and its always elusive nature. It all starts with a simple idea. Once I get there, I'll feel good. We all have a goal, a milestone, a version of ourselves that we believe will finally consolidate. But what we don't see is that arrival is a mirage. Each goal becomes a new starting point. Each achievement opens a wider horizon. The top of the mountain never ends. And so we keep climbing, not towards peace, but towards an endless becoming. Let's take it easy. Think about the last thing you really wanted. You worked for it, waited, sacrificed yourself, and finally you got it. Maybe it was exactly what you expected. Maybe it was even better. But then what? How long did that feeling last? One day, a week before your mind changed. Before it began to reach for something new. Not because you are ungrateful, but because that's what minds do. It moves. It is oriented towards the following. And the moment you arrive, it's no longer arrival. It is simply now. This is not failure. It is the design. The human mind evolved to pursue, not rest, to look for food, shelter, security, meaning. Fullness is not a place where one can stay. It is only briefly touched before taking off again. You can have everything you ever dreamed of and still feel incomplete. That is not emptiness. It is the paradox. It appears everywhere. The artist finishes a masterpiece and feels silence afterwards. The athlete wins the title and wakes up empty. The traveler arrives at their destination and immediately plans another. We pursue arrival, but our spirit is programmed for movement. And so we confuse achievement with arrival. We think that if we build enough, win enough, learn enough, we will stop wanting. But desire does not disappear. It evolves. And in doing so, it prevents us from ever fully arriving. Some try to solve the paradox with detachment. They say, do not give anything, do not expect anything, release desire, live in stillness. But that is also a form of arrival, another goal, another place to arrive. And soon even the spiritual search becomes a pursuit, an endless loop disguised as freedom. You want to arrive at not wanting to arrive. And so, the paradox repeats again. But perhaps the problem is not that we never arrive. Perhaps the problem is that we believe we should arrive, that we were promised a place of definitive peace, a chapter in which nothing hurts, a self that no longer doubts. But what if arriving isn't a destination? What if it is a practice, a rhythm, a moment? What if it is not someday, but now, briefly touched and then disappeared? What if you arrive not once, but again and again, fleetingly? A breath, a hug, a word, a sunset. It is not permanent, but it is real. The paradox of arrival does not tell you to stop pursuing. It tells you to stop expecting stillness to last, because life is not made to stay still. It flows. And the sooner you stop clinging to the dream of the finally, the more you can live in the truth of now, not as a compromise, but as a kind of wisdom, the one that sees movement not as failure, but as life. You walk, you climb, you reach the top, you breathe the air, and in that brief and brilliant silence, you feel it. You have arrived, but you do not try to retain it. You do not turn it into a destination. You do not confuse it with eternity. You let it be what it is. A moment, a breath, a heartbeat in rhythm. And then you take the next step, not because you lack something, but because you're alive. The paradox of the back of your head. You wake and walk towards the mirror. You brush your teeth. You fix your hair. You look at your face. You see yourself, or at least most of you. But there is a part that remains invisible. The back of your head. It is always out of reach, behind you, behind your eyes, behind your vision. You have never seen it directly, only in photos, reflections, or shadows, borrowed perspectives. Others see it more than you do. In a strange way, they know something about your appearance that you will never know. And that is the paradox. You live inside a body that you have never seen completely. It starts with something physical, literal. You can't look back. You depend on mirrors, cameras, descriptions. But none of those things feel entirely real. They are inverted, delayed, flattened. The image never fully becomes yours. You're the only person in your life who will never really see you from the outside. You're both the observer and the blind spot. You're the subject that you can never fully objectify. And then it gets stranger because it's not just your appearance, it's your behavior, your presence, your energy. People describe you. You seem distracted today. You're always so serene. You have a calming presence. You nod your head. You listen. But you don't always see it because you live from within. You know your thoughts, your contradictions, your doubts. They only see the external pattern. Sometimes it doesn't match. And then you wonder, am I who I think I am or who others say I am? The paradox of the back of your head becomes a metaphor. It's not just about your skull or your hair. It's about the parts of yourself that you can never fully access. You know what it feels like to be you, but you will never know what it feels like to see you. You will never hear your voice as others hear it. You will never experience your own presence. You will never see your expressions as they are perceived in real time. You will never be the recipient of your own kindness or cruelty. This raises the question, who has the truest version of you? Is it your internal narrative, your feelings, your intentions, or the external feedback, what others see, interpret, and remember? You think you're shy, but others find you magnetic. You think you are a mess, but others call you sensible. You think you're invisible, but someone has been watching you with silent admiration for years. The back of your head, what you cannot see, is still part of you. Simply, it does not correspond for you to perceive it. And maybe that is true of all parts of identity. Some philosophers call this the asymmetry of self. The idea is that we live in first person, but are seen in third. You know what you meant to say when you spoke, but others only heard the words. You felt panic in your chest, but they just saw a lost look. Inside, you were screaming. They thought you did not care. So who's right? Both? Neither? There's always a gap between what you experience and what others see. And that gap is like the back of your head. This is where the paradox intensifies. You are constantly acting for an audience you cannot fully understand. You are being interpreted in real time. Each gesture, each silence, each look, all have meanings that you have not assigned them. You are not only living, but being read. And you will never know the version of yourself that lives in another's mind. Not completely or directly, but like you will never be able to see the back of your head with your own eyes. You are present and mysterious, even to yourself. So what do you do with that? Do you try to control how you are perceived? Study your image, habits, patterns, until closing the gap. That path leads to obsession, disconnection, infinite mirrors. Or do you reject that? To say that only you know who you truly are. That path leads to isolation, blindness, refusing to grow. Neither extreme works well, because identity is not a fixed thing. It is a collaboration, a story told from both sides. You are what you feel and what others reflect back. You are your intentions and their impact. You are what you show and what you hide. And the paradox is that you will never have a complete vision. You will never fully get outside yourself. And, nevertheless, somehow you remain complete. There is one more twist here. Others also have their own blind spots. You know things about them that they will never see. How their voice trembles slightly when they lie. How their look softens when talking about someone they love. How they illuminate a room in which they think they disappear. You have parts of them they will never touch, just as they have parts of you. So maybe the paradox is not something to be solved. Maybe it is something one has to soften toward. To recognize that we all live in partial light. And what we cannot see in ourselves, we can hold more delicately in others. You sit in silence, without mirrors, without screens, only you and the vast, invisible parts of yourself that live in memory, perception, and space. The back of your head is still there. You still can't see it, but it's part of you. It always has been. And perhaps the fact that you can't fully see yourself is what makes the connection sacred, because another person can. The paradox of the pause button. You're living a perfect day. The light is golden. Laughter is heard. Everything seems to be in harmony. It is not dramatic. It is not noisy. It is perfect. And in the midst of all that, a thought arises. I wish I could freeze this moment. You don't say it literally. You mean you wish this sensation would last forever. You look for your phone. You take a photo. You try to retain it. But something has already changed. The fluid and alive moment has hardened slightly. Now you're no longer in the moment. You are watching yourself, trying to retain it. This is the paradox of the pause button. This is the contradiction between your desire to preserve the experience and how that desire interrupts it. The more you try to retain a moment, the less it retains you. Everything starts with something tender. You love something. You don't want it to end. So you look for the pause button. Not always literally. Sometimes it's a photo. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it is a desperate mental snapshot that tries to memorize the smell, the sound, the way his hand fits in yours. And yet, even as you do, something begins to fray. The spell is broken. The air changes. You are no longer present. You are preserving. And preserving is not the same as being present. This is where the paradox sharpens. To be truly inside a moment, you must let it go. You must not try to retain it. You must let it pass through you. Feel it, but don't capture it. But we are not made for that. We are creators of meaning, archivists, photographers of the soul. We want to take something with us, a proof that it was real, that we were there, that it mattered. So we strive, we pause, and in doing so, we lose exactly what we loved. Think about the last time you were moved to tears. Maybe it was for something beautiful, maybe for something sad, maybe for something that overwhelmed you. Whatever it was not captured. It was not something prepared. He did not ask you to record it. It simply was. And the more you surrendered to it, the more alive you felt. You were not archiving. You were not narrating. You were in it. But if someone had stopped you and said, "Wait, let's record this," the feeling would have escaped your grasp because some moments cannot be paused. And trying to pause them breaks them. This paradox exists in love. You are lying next to someone. The light is soft. Their breathing is steady. You feel so safe, so warm that it hurts a little. And a thought arises, I want this to last forever. You begin to fear the end, even while the moment is still unfolding. That fear takes you out of there. You imagine losing them. You imagine the change. And now you are regretting something that is not yet gone because you have not been able to let it pass naturally. You have tried to press pause. And in doing so, the moment has faded faster. Not because it was brief, but because you are no longer inside it. Here is the paradox in all its fullness. We try to preserve something by getting out of it, but by leaving, we leave it behind. The impulse to pause is not incorrect. It is human. It has its origin in reverence, but it also has its origin in fear. The fear of not remembering, of not feeling it again, of it escaping us without us realizing it. But perhaps simply realizing it is enough. Perhaps it is not necessary to record it. Perhaps it just needs to be lived. This is seen in the pain of the last days with someone. We try to retain everything. Their voice, their smile, the way they stir the tea. We try to record it in memory. But in doing so, we become a recorder, not a companion. We are already regretting what is still here. We are already treating it as a memory. And that distance, that instinct for preservation, has two faces. It honors, but also isolates, because when you press pause, you stop dancing and the music keeps playing. There's another perspective. The moments you captured, the photos, the videos, the diaries, you revisit them, you remember them, but sometimes you feel that something is missing. The image is flat, the sound is cold, the memory is real, but it is not alive. Because a recording isn't the thing itself. A photo of a kiss is not a kiss. A video of a laugh is not a laugh. The pause button saves the frame, but not feeling. So what is the answer? Do you stop trying to preserve anything? Do you give up on memories? Do you honor the moment by being present, giving it importance while there, letting it flow through you, needing no retention? You don't grab it. You greet it. You say to it, I see you. Thank you. And then you let it go, like a bird that lands on your hand, but you know that it will only be there briefly before flying away. That doesn't make it less valuable, but more. That is what makes some moments sacred. Not their duration or the fact of capturing them, but the way in which you surrender to them completely without needing them to be anything other than what they are. And when they pass, you don't chase them. You don't rewind. You simply stay there, grateful for having been there when it happened. Even if no one else ever sees it, even if you never see it again, because it existed. And that is enough. You return to the perfect day. The light is still golden. The air is still soft. You don't look for your phone. You don't try to freeze it. You just breathe. You let it be imprinted on your bones. And when it fades, because it will, you don't regret the loss. You feel the richness of having lived it fully, freely, without pauses. The paradox of the one-way arrow. A glass falls from you. It hits the ground and breaks. You see how the fragments scatter and spin briefly before settling. It is unmistakable. Time has advanced. The past is intact. The future has arrived. There is no doubt in your body or in your mind. The event occurred in a single direction. But imagine this. The same glass on the floor, the fragments trembling, then rising, reassembling in the air, resting in your hand, intact. No fundamental law of physics prohibits it. The equations work in both directions. There is no inherent rule that says time must advance. However, it always does. Why? This is the paradox of the unidirectional arrow. The contradiction between the physical laws of the universe, which are symmetrical in time, and the flow of time as we experience it, which is irreversible. Why do we remember the past and not the future? Why do we age and never rejuvenate? Why does time seem like a line when physics describes it as a loop? Let's start with your life. Every day you wake up slightly different, older, more changed than the night before. And you know without being told that today follows yesterday, that events have an order. But what gives time its direction? If the laws of motion don't care, what does? The most accepted answer is entropy. Entropy is the measure of disorder in a system. An orderly room has little entropy. A messy room, a lot of entropy. And the second law of thermodynamics says that in any closed system, entropy always increases. Things break down. They do not spontaneously rearrange themselves. You can beat an egg, but you can't unbeat it. You can burn a letter, but the ashes will not form the words again. Thus, entropy gives time a direction, a forward momentum, from order to disorder, from symmetry to chaos, from birth to death. But entropy is not a cause. It is a description. It does not explain why we remember childhood, but not death. It does not say why consciousness flows in one direction. It only points out that, statistically, systems prefer disorder. So, where does the experience of the arrow of time come from? Why does it feel so firm, so relentless? Why can't you go back? Some theories suggest that time is an illusion, that all moments exist at once, and that the sensation of the now is just the way the brain orders them, that your birth, your first kiss, your last breath, everything coexists, that you're not moving through time, but experiencing fragments of a fixed eternal structure, like frames of a movie, one after another. Movement is just your consciousness sliding through stillness. But if that is true, why can't you go back? Why can't you revisit a day you loved or undo a mistake? If reality is already there, why can you only see it once? This is where the paradox intensifies. Nothing in mathematics says you can't go back, but everything in your body says you can't. The universe is reversible, but your mind is not. Memory does not work backwards. Regret does, but not memory. And so we live in this strange dissonance, trapped in a directionless universe with a heart that only goes in one direction. Think about how time gives meaning to your life. You don't love things because they last. You love them because they don't last. You savor them because they fade. The moment passes, the child grows, the season ends. This directionality gives weight to life. You try to hold on to what you know will go away. You try to remember what you know will not return. If time were reversible, would anything still be sacred? Or is loss what gives shine to everything? There is a silent pain within the paradox, because you are not only observing time. It carries you along. Whether you want to move forward or not, you will. Even when you're not prepared, even when you cling on, even when you're not sure of who you are becoming, time does not stop. It does not stop. It simply continues, and you continue with it. So what can you do? You cannot go back. You cannot skip anything, but you can slow the pace. You can pay attention. You can mark time not with clocks, but with care and presence. You can turn ordinary minutes golden, and when they pass, as they will, you can let them go, not as loss, but as movement, as part of the current. Because that is time. It is not an enemy or trap, just a river in which you swim. You sit in a quiet room. The light moves along the wall. You breathe. You do not need to rewind. You do not need to jump forward. You are here. And in this unique moment, you are not lost to time. You are made of it. The paradox of the kind truth. Someone asks you a question. You know the answer, and it is true, but it could hurt them. You doubt. Do you say it bluntly? Do you soften it? Do you say something close to the truth, but without fully being it? It is not about deceiving. It is about caring. You do not want to lie, but you do not want to hurt either. And suddenly, the truth is no longer a straight line. It is a curve, a weight, a question without an easy answer. This is the paradox of kind truth. The silent daily tension between honesty and compassion. Because sometimes the truth is hard and silence soft, and both feel like love. Let's start with something simple. A friend shows you a text. They ask you what you think. You see defects, some obvious. You also see effort, vulnerability, hope. Do you tell them exactly what you see? Or do you choose a version of truth that encourages instead of criticizing? It seems insignificant, but it is not, because this moment is repeated everywhere. Your partner asks you how you are. A colleague asks for your opinion. A child asks if they are good at something. You are left with a choice, the truth or comfort. And you ask yourself, why can't I offer both? This is where the paradox begins. We say that we want the truth. We say that we value honesty. But we also need belonging, dignity, warmth. And sometimes the complete truth feels like a storm. So we navigate, soften, omit, not out of malice, but love. And yet, hiding truth can feel like betrayal. Offering comfort can seem like deception. So what do you choose? What do you owe more? The truth itself or the person you say it to? Some say that honesty is always best. That clarity is kindness. That anything less than truth is manipulation. That we owe each other truth, raw, complete, unfiltered. But others say truth without empathy is cruelty. That the moment matters. That the tone matters. That people have different thresholds and love adapts. And so we live in the space between. We want to be honest, but we don't want to hurt. We want to be kind, but we don't want to lie. And the paradox deepens. The more you care, the harder to tell truth. Here is a deeper layer. Sometimes the truth you hold is subjective. An opinion, feeling, a perception. You think someone is walking away. You feel that they have changed. You perceive distance, but you're not sure. So you keep it to yourself. You think, maybe I am wrong. You remain silent to protect peace. But inside, something accumulates. And when it finally comes out, it's too strong. It causes more pain than if you had said before. You're trying to be kind, but silence cut deep. And that is the paradox. Avoiding a little pain now can create deeper pain later. So what does it mean to be honest and kind? Can those two coexist in the same sentence? Maybe not always. Maybe sometimes you must tell someone something they don't want to hear, because you love them more than their comfort or let a little lie pass. Because the moment requires more delicacy than precision. In any case, you carry the weight. You endure the tension, and the more you love someone, the heavier it becomes. Think about your own life. The truths they told you that have shocked you. The things you were not ready to hear. Have they helped at all? Were they cruel then? Were they both of those? Now think of things they never told you. The affection felt, but they cannot express. The worries they had but swallowed down. The criticisms that lived there in silence. Would you have wanted to know them? Or was not knowing a form of mercy? There is no universal answer. Some need clarity more than they need comfort. Others need safety before they grow. Some wounds heal better in air. Others scar worse when exposed now. And that is how you read environments. You learn how to read people. And you learn that truth is not only what you say. It is how, when, and why you say it. That way of expression is part of honesty. Kindness is not opposite to truth, but rather its most careful form. Even so, paradox is never resolved. Because no matter how soft you speak, truth cuts. And no matter how soft you lie, silence will. So maybe the goal is not to eliminate pain, but to transmit the truth with love. To speak not to free you from your burden, but to honor its growth. To say, I care to tell you the hard thing. Or, I care enough about you to keep truth until you are prepared. Both things can be love, and both can be painful. And sometimes you will not know which of the two things it is until much later on. You're sitting with someone loved. She asks a question of you. You know the answer will change something. You feel its weight in your chest. You pause. You breathe in and out. And then, slowly, carefully you speak now. Not with abruptness, not falsehood, but reverence. And in that moment, you aren't choosing between kindness. You're interweaving them thread by thread, word for word. The paradox found in small meaning. You are doing something every day. Washing dishes, closing windows, tying shoelaces. No music plays at all. No one is watching now. There is no great story here. And nevertheless, you still feel something. A flash of calm, a softness, and a quiet certainty. And for a moment, the world need not be dramatic to feel full. You're not achieving anything. You're not demonstrating anything. You're simply living. And that's enough. But then a thought arises. If this moment is so small, why does it feel so big? This is the paradox of small meaning. The silent contradiction between what the world rewards and what your soul responds to. Let's begin with how we measure value. Big things are praised, promotions, followers, milestones, legacy. We are taught that meaning comes from scale, impact, and influence. The bigger it is, the more it matters. But that creates a strange pressure. You start treating your life like a portfolio. Each action is an investment. Each day is a metric. Each conversation is an opportunity to build something visible. And deep down, a silent question resonates. Is it worth it? Is it enough? Will it be remembered? Now imagine this. You're sitting with someone grieving. You say almost nothing. You simply stay. You refill their glass of water. You take their hand. You don't change the world, but you change something in them, in you. You don't write it down. You don't publish it. You simply live it. And when you leave, you feel a weight lifted from you. A weight you didn't even know you had. No one saw it, but it was important. This is the paradox. Small gestures can have infinite meaning, but they leave no trace, no headlines, no legacy. They disappear like breath on glass. And yet, it may be precisely those moments that shape who you are, the ones you remember years later. Not because they were impressive, but because they were authentic. You see this in childhood. The random afternoon you spent walking with your parents. The snack someone prepared for you when you were sick. The way your friend looked at you when you were scared. They're not great moments. They're not in photo albums. They're not recorded in history. But they are engraved in you. And as much as you pursue greatness, you carry these silent memories with reverence. Because, in some strange way, they taught you what love is. But this is where the paradox intensifies. Because we keep chasing after great things. We keep wanting our lives to have meaning, to matter, to endure. And deep down it worries us. If nobody remembers it, was it of any use? If it has no repercussion, does it matter? And the world answers no. It rewards visibility, virality, and performance. And that's how you start to distrust small things. You discard it. You say, that was not a real job. That was not real growth. That was not enough. And in doing so, you reduce your own happiness. But what if it was the other way around? What if meaning were not measured by scale, but by intimacy, by attention, by the depth with which you feel the moment? Not by how long it lasts, nor by how many people see it, nor by how many likes it receives, but by whether it was important to you. Because maybe that is all that meaning has ever been. Not something that is declared, but something that is perceived. Here is the twist. Small meaning often appears when you're not looking for it. You are removing crumbs from the table. You are observing how the light changes on the wall. You're saying good night to someone you love. Nothing special. And yet, there's something there. A murmur under the silence. A whisper that says, this matters. Not because it is grandiose, but because you are awake to see it. And perhaps that is what makes something sacred. Not its size, but your awareness of it. So what does this mean for your life? Maybe it means that not everything has to lead somewhere. That not every day needs a narrative arc. That not all interactions should be optimized. Maybe it's okay to do things that are delicate and useless and beautiful. Prepare tea, sit in silence, write something that nobody will read, water a plant, call someone just to hear their voice, not for productivity, not for leaving a legacy, but because you are alive. And that is reason enough. The paradox does not deny greatness. It does not say that ambition is incorrect. It simply says that you do not miss the small things just because it is silent. Do not overlook the moment that changes you because it was not photographed, because it did not go viral, because nobody applauded. Perhaps the most significant thing that you will do in your life is invisible. And perhaps that is what makes it real. You wake up, you stretch, you breathe, you make the bed a little tidier than usual. Nobody sees it. Nobody thanks you. But you feel that something fits. A small click in the machinery of your life. Without fireworks or symphonies. Only a silent yes. A moment that did not need greatness to be everything. The paradox is the road not taken. There is a path, a quiet split in the forest. Two directions, just two possibilities. You stay there. Still, with your heart full of questions, and choose one. You take the road on the left, and as your feet advance, the road on the right disappears. Not physically, but rather existentially. The moment you make a decision, all other possibilities just vanish. 1,000 lives now collapse in that instant. Each one slightly different from the life you live now. This is the paradox of roads not taken. The painful awareness that choosing something means losing everything else. It's not about just regret. It's about the possibility and how that becomes irreversible. We live in a world of linear time now. The moments stretch ever forward. Decisions are made, and once they're made, cannot be undone. You simply can't rewind. You can't try some other life. You only advance through the version of reality that you helped create. But your mind is infinite still. It goes around and around, revisits. Imagine what would have happened if you had said yes instead of no. If you had stayed instead of leaving now. If you had chosen them or not. Or you had told them what you felt before they'd left. And in your imagination, the road you didn't take remains open, continues shining, continues calling you. Therein now lies the paradox. Each decision is like a door. Once opened, it closes right behind you. But all the other doors remain visible in memory still. You live in a room, but your mind keeps wandering those halls. You still remember the feeling of almost, of maybe. You still carry the weight of invisible lives now. And sometimes those ghosts are heavier than the life you actually live. In physics, there is an idea called the many worlds interpretation, according to which each quantum decision divides the universe. In one, you turned left, in another you went right. In one you kissed them, in another you stayed silent. Each possible choice gives rise to a new timeline now. Infinite versions of you, each unaware of all the others. It's not just science fiction. It is a possible answer to quantum indeterminacy now. And even if it's not literally true, it feels like it. You feel the weight of all the lives you've never lived. And the paradox is this: the more meaningful your life becomes, the more losses it contains. Because becoming something means not becoming everything else. Being here means not being there at all. Being with them means not being with someone else. Saying yes means 1,000 silent no that you will never pronounce. And so, fullness goes hand in hand with the pain. Repentance isn't always sadness. Sometimes it is astonishment. Sometimes it is the quiet recognition that life is finite, that you cannot do everything, that you are always choosing, even when unaware. The job you did not apply for, the city you did not move to, the conversation you did not start, the life you did not touch. And the paradox is that even good decisions contain pain, because all roads are made of sacrifices, and you will never know what the other life would have been. Some try to solve this with logic. They say, you made the best decision you could make. The rest does not matter. But the heart does not work like that. The heart is not a calculator. It does not forget the shape of other dreams. It remembers its colors, its textures, its aromas, and cries for them, even if it rejoices for where you are. This is the paradox that gratitude and pain can coexist in the same breath. That joy can be next to the shadow of what could have been. That you can love your life and still long for those who have left. But perhaps this is not a defect. Perhaps it is human to feel the echo of lives you have not lived. To know that each moment is sacred precisely because it has been chosen and because it has cost something. Perhaps that pain is not a wound, but a compass that does not push you back, but reminds you that you are alive. And that choice is sacred, and time is unidirectional. And although you cannot travel all the roads, you can travel this one with fullness, with attention, with gratitude. There is a poem by Robert Frost that gives a name to this paradox. It ends like this: I took the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. But the truth is that you never know. You never get to know. There is no way to travel both roads and compare them. You only travel one. And the difference it makes is the only difference there will ever be. That is also the paradox. That meaning is not born from certainty, but from commitment, from taking a step towards the unknown and saying, yes, this is mine. So the next time you find yourself at a crossroads, the next time the weight of a decision oppresses your chest, the next time you wonder what would have happened if you had chosen something else, remember this: you're not destined to know it. You are destined to choose and to live that choice with reverence. Not because it was perfect, but because it was yours. The paradox of the lottery, the improbable certainty. You buy a ticket, just one. 6 numbers chosen at random. The odds of winning are astronomical. 1 in hundreds of millions. You know it. Even so, you buy the ticket. And then the numbers are announced. 1, 2, 3. You stare. They match. Oh, you have won. Your hands tremble. Your world dissolves in light and incredulity. The impossible just happened. But here's a question. Was it truly impossible? Or have you simply misinterpreted what impossible means? This is the lottery paradox, also known as the improbable certainty. It begins in statistics, but ends with philosophy. It begins with the assumption that if something is improbable, we should not believe it will happen. And nevertheless, improbable things happen all of the time. There is always someone who will win the lottery. Lightning strikes someone somewhere. A coin lands 20 times in a row on heads. Your favorite song plays in a cafeteria in a city you have never been to the moment you walk in. Life is full of improbable events. So why does each seem so impossible when it happens? And if the improbable happens so often, should we even call it improbable? Let's slow down. Let's say there are 1 million tickets in a lottery. Only one will win. You do not know which one. Before the draw, you say that any specific ticket is almost certain to lose. That's rational. It's logical. But after the draw, one ticket wins. And then you must say, this ticket won. You thought it would not. And now you know that it did. And here is a paradox. It was rational to believe that it would lose and rational to believe that it would win. The same ticket, the same event, 2 opposing beliefs, both are rational. So what is truth? The lottery paradox reveals the contradiction between probability and belief, between what we believe is probable and what happens. You are asked to believe that something is almost certain to be false, such as all lottery tickets being losers. But at the same time, you must believe that one is true, that one will win, that the impossible is guaranteed. So, how can both be sustained? How can one believe that all individual claims are false, and at the same time, believe that some must be true? That is the paradox. In everyday life, this becomes even stranger. You hear someone tell an incredible, mysterious story. Maybe it happened to them. Maybe it happened to someone they know. Your first instinct is to doubt. Why? Because it is too rare, too coincidental, too perfect. But rare things do happen. In a world with billions of people, there is always someone who lives a unique experience. There is always someone who has a 1 in a million chance. So, when you hear it, are you right to doubt? Or are you simply not prepared for how frequent the improbable is? There is an even deeper layer to the paradox. Imagine flipping a coin 10 times. It becomes expensive 10 times. It seems suspicious, rigged, fixed to you. But the probability of that sequence occurring is exactly the same as any other sequence of 10 launches. It is as probable as heads appearing 10 times. Your mind sees a pattern where there is only probability because the human mind is not made for randomness. We see streaks. We feel that there is meaning. We look for stories. And thus, the improbable seems impossible to us, even if it is not. The paradox is also reflected in knowledge philosophy. Imagine you meet 100 new people. Statistically, none of them will remember your birthday, like the same obscure book, or have the same dream. But one does. You create a bond. You call it destiny. But was it just statistics that brought something inevitable? Was it something rare, or predictably so? The paradox blurs the line between miracle and mathematics, between chance and certainty. In epistemology, the paradox forces us to ask ourselves, at what point does the improbable become impossible? What degree of improbability must something have for us to refuse to believe it happened? 1 in 10, 1 in a million, 1 in a billion. And if we reject every improbable event as false, then we will reject almost everything that really happens. Because reality is not an average. It is irregular. It is unequal. It is full of atypical cases. Exceptional events define history. Wars, inventions, discoveries, love, loss. So, how can one think clearly in a world where the improbable is commonplace? That is the paradox. Some philosophers argue that we should only believe what is most probable. Others say, no, belief must follow the evidence, even if the evidence points to something unusual. Others suggest that our frameworks of probability are incomplete, that we confuse personal improbability with global predictability. What is rare for you may be inevitable elsewhere. Your miracle may be someone else's Tuesday. And so the paradox remains. We treat the improbable as false until it happens. Then we treat it as truth, even though we doubted it a moment ago. Both positions seem rational. Both seem safe. And yet, they contradict each other. Not in theory, but in experience. So, what can be taken from this? Perhaps only this. Be careful when you dismiss the improbable. Do not confuse the improbable with impossible. And do not confuse the common with insignificant. Life is full of long probabilities, and there is always someone somewhere who overcomes them. That doesn't make them less real. It makes them more human, because we do not live by averages. We live by moments. And the moment you are in now is the only one that has ever existed. A statistical impossibility. And, nevertheless, here you are. The paradox of the mirror. There's a mirror on the wall. You have looked at it 1,000 times. It shows your face, your movements, your world upside down. You raise your right hand. The image raises its left. You smile. It returns the smile to you. Everything seems familiar until you stop and realize something strange. Why does the mirror invert left and right, but not up and down? It is not flipping the image. It is only rotating it. But why? After all, the mirror isn't deciding to invert things from left to right. It is not inverting anything at all. So, what is really happening? Where's the inversion? Where does the mirror end and your perception begin? The mirror's paradox does not reside in mathematics. It resides in space, in reference to the invisible scaffolding of your mind that tells you what is up, what is down, what is left, and who you are. It seems like a question of physics, but it silently becomes a metaphysical one. Because when you stand before the mirror, the world you see is not inverted. It is rotated, but only from your point of view, only from inside your body. If you raise your right hand, your reflection also raises its right hand, but only from its perspective, not from yours. Therefore, the mirror does not change direction. You do. You imagine yourself turning and expect the image to follow. But it doesn't. It stares at you, as if saying, "You're still here. You have never left." But the paradox is even deeper because the mirror's image knows you perfectly. It responds instantly. It follows all your movements. It reflects you with more precision than any photograph, any video, any description. And, nevertheless, it is not you. It cannot speak. It cannot act. It has no thoughts, will, or memory. But it seems almost real. And in some moments in the stillness and silence, you wonder what would happen if that image was more real than you. Not in the physical sense, but in clarity, consistency, presence. Because while you age, forget, and deviate, the mirror is always there, waiting. Here is where the paradox starts to lean. If the image reflects everything about you except your perspective, then what is missing? What is it that the mirror cannot show? You know the answer. You feel it. It cannot show what it's like to be you. Your thoughts, your weight, your sense of orientation. Not only spatial, but existential. It reflects the appearance, but not consciousness. So you stand in front of the mirror, perfectly reflected, and yet completely alone. This raises a deeper question. What is a self without a vision of itself? Because when you look in the mirror, you see yourself from the outside, as others see you, as the world sees you, but not how you feel. And the person in the mirror does not know what you know. He is not aware of the hand he's raising. He does not feel that he is moving. He has no idea that you are watching him. So, who's more real? You, trapped in your body, or the version that everyone sees? What if all the people you have met have only known your image in a mirror? The version you have never really seen? The version you only see when you're not yourself? The paradox intensifies because, in many ways, you're more familiar with your mirror self than your real self. You have seen yourself more in mirrors than any other way. Every photo, every reflection, every inverted look. So when you see a video or an image that is not a mirror, it seems strange, wrong, foreign. Others say it looks like you, but you do not feel like you because the person you think you are is backwards. You have built your identity from an image that no one else has seen. You intimately know a version of yourself that does not exist, and everyone else knows a version of you that you will never see completely. Who is right? Who are you? There is a deeper wrinkle. When you speak in front of the mirror, your lips move exactly like the image. Your expressions match. Your emotions are reflected. And yet, your voice does not come out from there. Your voice comes out of you. The image says nothing. It imitates but never initiates. You start to wonder, is this what consciousness looks like from the outside? A perfect performance without interior, without consciousness, only answers. But is that not what people see when they look at you? A body, an image, a voice, but not the you inside, not the observer behind your eyes. So maybe the paradox is not about the mirror. Maybe it is about being observed and never truly being seen. Now imagine this. You move away from the mirror. You leave the room. The image has disappeared. But was he ever really there? Or was it simply a projection? A real-time hallucination conjured by crystal and light? What if the image didn't follow you? What if it was tied to you, unable to exist without your presence? A ghost that appears only when you look? An illusion that dies the instant you blink? Then you realize the mirror never shows you. Only the act of looking at yourself. That is the paradox. You place yourself again before the mirror. You stare. You tilt your head. He tilts back. You move your hand slowly, as if to catch it, but don't succeed. It's perfect, instantaneous. You can't beat it. You can't catch it by pretending. And suddenly, you feel the disturbing sensation that it looks at you, that somehow the reflection has become a presence. Not because it has its own will, but because you projected yours on it. You are animating a ghost, then fearing what you created. This is where the mirror becomes a metaphor, not of symmetry, but identity. Because much of who we are is shaped by reflection, not only in glass, but in people. We see ourselves through others, their reactions, their affection, their rejection. We reflect them, and they reflect us, and in the end, we don't know where we end and the reflection begins. So when someone smiles at you, do you feel it because they love you, or because your reflection smiles? In mythology, mirrors have always been portals, not only to other worlds, but to deeper truths. They are tools of vanity, of revelation, and of madness. Because the more you look, the more you start to wonder, who is that? Is that how I really am? Is that how I move? Is that what they see? And the most terrifying question, am I the reflection? Is the self that I feel inside the original, or just another mirror? A mind that reflects itself infinitely. A recursive loop, a face observing a face, a thought that thinks about thought. Where does it stop? Does it stop? Or is your entire identity a mirror in front of another mirror that extends infinitely into darkness? Now the room is silent again. You are alone with the mirror. You blink. He blinks. You breathe. He breathes. And in that stillness, you ask yourself the only question that matters. What do you see when you stop trying to be seen? Because the mirror will always reflect what is in front of it, but it cannot reflect what is inside it. That part is yours. That part exists in silence, and that part does not move to the left or to the right. The paradox of puppet strings. You're spending the day. You ask for coffee. You look at your phone. You smile at a stranger. Suddenly, you feel the need to take a different route home. You follow it. It seems spontaneous, free to you. But then you stop. You ask yourself, why did I choose that? And as soon as you ask yourself that, certainty begins to fade. Was it habit? Was it impulse? Was it suggestion? Did you really choose? Or did something else choose for you? This is the paradox of puppet strings. The disturbing tension between your experience of free will and the invisible forces that shape each choice. You feel free. But what if that feeling is an illusion? What if you're not the puppeteer, but a puppet? Let's start with mind. At this moment, you are having thoughts. They appear in your consciousness. They become phrases as they carry emotions, images, memories. But here is a twist. You have not chosen them. They have simply arisen. You have not chosen to think about the coffee, the discussion last week, or that worry about the future. The thought has appeared, and then you have noticed it, and perhaps you have claimed it. You said, I am thinking this, but you did not create it. It arose without you asking. So who is in command? Some neuroscientists maintain that decisions are made before you know it, that your brain decides, and then your consciousness justifies it later. They point to experiments in which people are asked to press a button whenever they want. The brain shows activity that predicts the choice seconds before the person knows it. You feel that you're deciding in real time, but your brain already knew. And if your brain knew before you, who are you? And what does it mean to choose? Here is where the paradox starts to develop, because you feel like an agent. You feel like someone who chooses. But everything that makes you be you, your genetics, your education, your traumas, your culture, your memories, were given to you. You did not choose your parents. You did not choose your environment. You did not choose the language you learned to think in. And, nevertheless, you make your decisions from that data. Then, are they truly yours? Or are you the product of things you cannot control, behaving exactly as those causes require? Imagine a puppet with strings. Each string represents an influence. One is from your childhood. Another is fear of rejection. Another is hope for success. One is a memory of aroma. Another is the rhythm of song. If you pull the strings in order, the puppet walks on stage. It seems free now. It moves by itself. But is it choosing or being manipulated? Now imagine this. What would happen if the puppet held the strings? What would happen if the puppet believed it was the puppeteer? Some philosophers defend determinism, the idea that all events, including human actions, are determined by previous causes. According to this view, free will is an illusion. You could not have chosen otherwise. Given the state of your brain, the stimuli surrounding you, and the moment in time, the choice you made was inevitable. You were always going to choose chocolate over vanilla. You were always going to leave. You were always going to say yes. It seems like freedom, but it was destiny hidden behind complexity. Others believe in compatibilism, the idea that free will can exist in a determined universe, that you are free as long as you act according to your desires, even if those desires are caused. According to this view, freedom does not mean without a cause. It means without coercion. You may not choose all desires, but you're free if they do not force you to act against them. Even so, this raises a question. If your desires are shaped, not chosen, are they truly yours? Is it freedom if you have not chosen the things you want? There is yet another layer. What if your mind were a democracy? Not a single one, but many minds. A council of views. One wants safety. One wants to risk. One wants revenge. One wants forgiveness. One wants sleep. One wants to change world. They argue. They vote. They compete for attention. And whoever wins becomes your decision. You say, I have chosen this. But it was not you. It has been them. And you, the narrator, have only told it. Then who are you? The puppeteer, stage, all the theater. The paradox is this. You feel like a unified chooser. But the more you look, the more the chooser disappears, replaced by systems, replaced by stories, replaced by causes that you cannot trace. Even your desire to feel free may not be chosen. It may just be part of the script. And nevertheless, you feel it. That desire, that reach, that hunger for agency, that feeling of I am the one who decides. But here is the strangest part. Even if the paradox is real, even if every choice is caused, even if free will is an illusion, you still suffer. You still regret. You still feel guilt. You still feel pride. The emotions remain. The moral weight remains. You still are in the story, even if you have not written it. And perhaps that is the deepest trap, that you are responsible for decisions that you never really made. But perhaps the paradox does not end in despair. Perhaps it ends in sweetness, in humility, and in curiosity. Perhaps you are not destined to control everything. Perhaps freedom is not about having no cause, but about seeing yourself more clearly, seeing the threads, following them, slowly untangling them. Not to escape them, but to understand them. And by understanding, perhaps you get something better than freedom. Perhaps you get wisdom. And so your day passes again. You order a coffee. You look at your phone. You smile at a stranger. You take the longest way home. And this time you stop. You ask yourself, was it really me? And perhaps the answer does not matter. Because in that moment of reflection, the puppet looks up and sees the threads for the first time. The paradox of someday. There is something you have wanted to do, something that matters to you. It waits patiently on the margins of your life, in the pauses between work and sleep, in the soft pain that is behind every moment of leisure. Perhaps it is a book you want to write, a place you want to go, a person you want to reach, a life you want to try. You say you will do it soon, when things calm down, when the time is right, when you are ready. Not now, but someday, always someday, until one day, you look up and realize that that day never came. And the worst thing is that it never existed. This is the paradox of someday, the illusion of infinite time within the limits of a single finite life. It starts with a promise. You will do it later. It seems responsible, rational, and strategic. You postpone the difficult, the daring, the vulnerable for a moment that seems more appropriate. But that moment never arrives because someday is not a day. It has no date, time, or urgency. It lives in the abstract, the imaginary, the unreal. And thus it becomes the safest place to bury the things that matter most. The paradox is this. You can always imagine that you will do something later until there is no later left. You can live your whole life with a plan to start and never start. You can reach old age with unfulfilled intentions. You can die with unexploited possibilities, and until the end, you will continue feeling that you almost made it. Let's step back. Think about all the things you have said. I will start after the holidays. I will travel when I have more money. I will ask for forgiveness when it is less uncomfortable. I will change jobs when the time is right. Each of these things seems like a choice, but it is not a choice to act. It is a choice to delay. And the delay has a cost, but it's silent. It accumulates invisibly, like a debt that you never see until it devours your freedom. Here is a strange truth. Later is seductive because it does not demand anything from you. Now you don't have to be brave. You don't have to fail. You don't have to risk being seen. You just have to wait. And the more you wait, the more justified it seems. You say, I have waited so long. I can wait a little more. You convince yourself that the moment is around the corner until the path you have traveled extends for decades. And what you wanted to do does not disappear. It calcifies. It becomes part of who you wanted to be, not who you are. There's a deeper pain in this paradox. It is not just about a lost opportunity. It is about a false comfort. Someday is a mattress, a way to avoid admitting that you're not going to do what you wanted, that the door is closing, not because the world is unfair, but because you have been waiting for it to open on its own. We tell ourselves that the clock will announce when the time is right. But clocks only announce what is, never what could be. Time does not create preparation. Action does. Think about this. If there is something you have dreamed of but have not started, ask yourself, have I really been waiting or hiding? Have I preserved a perfect image by refusing to put it to the test? Have I traded risk for fantasy? Because unstarted dreams seem perfect. They cannot be judged. They cannot be rejected. They live in a showcase, protected, admired, sterile. But a life that has never been lived is not safe. It is a ghost, and it will haunt you. Some try to resolve the paradox with motivation. They say you have to do it now, that you should not wait. But the paradox is not about doing. It is about believing. Believing that your future self will be stronger, braver, wiser, more prepared, freer. But your future self is not a stranger. It is you with less time. And if you do not act now, why would he? So, what breaks this vicious circle? It is not the pressure, nor the shame, but the honesty of looking at what you have postponed and saying, I will never do this, and it is okay. Or I'm going to do it now. Because waiting is lying. Someday you will have to destroy it and replace it with something real, a date, a step, a breath, even if it is only a word. Because here is the final twist. When you finally act, when you do what you have been postponing for years, it rarely feels like a great awakening. It feels small, shaky, uneven, real. And in that first imperfect moment, you see the truth. It was never about time. It was always about permission, and only you could give it. You return to the room where what you love has waited. It has accumulated dust, but it has not disappeared. It never did. You approach it and say softly, now, and for the first time, someday disappears. And the moment begins. The paradox of someday. The paradox of cosmic insignificance. You're standing on a beach at night. The stars shine in the sky, silent and ancient. The waves break, indifferent, infinite. You feel something immense moving beyond you. Galaxies spinning, suns exploding, light traveling for billions of years to reach your eyes only for you to blink. And then the thought arises, what am I compared to this? You feel that smallness, that fleeting awareness that you are a speck on a speck, floating in a dark and infinite sea. And yet, you feel so deeply. You suffer, you dream, you fall in love, you suffer, you wait, and you wonder how something so small can feel something so big. This is the paradox of cosmic insignificance. The dissonance between the tiny scale of your life and the immense scale of the universe containing it. It is not just about astronomy. It is about meaning, about the weight of your decisions in a cosmos that does not perceive them. It is about the depth of your emotions in a universe that feels nothing. It is about the fact that you matter to yourself, to others, and however, in the cosmic sense, you do not matter. And both these statements are true. Let's begin with perspective. The Earth is a pale blue dot. All our history, wars, religions, empires, everything has happened on this fragile sphere in the darkness. You are one of the 8 billion people who currently live. A life, 80, maybe 90 years, a blink, and then you're no longer there. And yet, your life is the only one that you will fully experience. For you, it means everything. Every fear, triumph, every silent and inexpressible pain. How can it seem so large when it is so small in every way? Science doesn't help much. It tells you the truth, and that truth can be brutal. You're made of stardust. Yes, but you're also temporal. Your thoughts will not survive the collapse of your brain. Your name won't survive the eraser of memory. It is possible that your entire species will not survive a few more centuries. And in the cold mathematics of physics, your history is irrelevant. The atoms will continue to exist without you. The galaxies will not stop. The light will not dim. So where does that leave you? Do you despair? Do you deny the magnitude? Do you cling to stories to make everything seem grander? Or do you accept the paradox that your life is both infinite and unrepeatable? Repeatable? That your heartbreak means nothing to the stars and everything to you? This is where paradox thrives. Because if you really are insignificant, if nothing matters, then you're free. You are free to choose what matters. You are free to worry, to create, and to connect. Not because it changes the universe, but because it changes you. If your meaning isn't built, then it is handmade, and that is sacred. There's a deeper pain within the paradox. It is understanding that even your greatest acts, your legacy, your children, your art are ephemeral. They will fade. Not tomorrow, but eventually. Time erodes everything. You know it. And yet, you keep trying. You keep writing. You keep loving. You keep whispering words to the silence. And maybe that is the most human thing that exists. Reaching into the void and leaving something behind anyway. Some argue that meaning must come from beyond us. If the universe does not care, then nothing matters. But maybe it is the other way around. Maybe meaning from outside is less meaningful. Maybe the things you choose to take care of precisely because nobody forced you to do it are the most honest. Like planting a tree you will never sit under. Like saying, I forgive you even though nobody asked you to. Like living kindly in a world that rewards cruelty. That kind of meaning is ungranted. It is forged defying scale, despite insignificance. The paradox becomes clear. Your life matters because it does not matter. Because nobody told you what for. Because there are no divine instructions. Because in this vast, indifferent expanse, you keep choosing to care. And that act, that gesture, is more powerful than all the stars because they do not know what they are. But you do. You walk along the beach again. The stars are still shining. The tide keeps pulling. You feel small. You feel ephemeral. But you also feel awake. You realize that your time is a spark and was never supposed to last only to shine. The paradox of masks. You enter a room. There are already people there, some acquaintances, other strangers, others at an intermediate point. You adjust your voice, posture, and words. It is subtle and almost automatic. You become a little more polite, a little more confident or quieter or more witty or more careful or more pleasant. And at that moment, something shifts. It is not a lie, not exactly acting, but you are not entirely you. A version of you, the you that fits a mask. And there is a paradox. If each room brings out a different version of you, who are you when nobody sees you? This is the mask paradox, the disturbing tension between your true self and the selves you project. It starts so innocently. You act differently with your parents than with friends, at work than at home, and on the internet than in person. It is normal. It is expected. It is called being socially aware, adaptable, or professional. But over time, you start to wonder, are these masks that I wear or am I? If each role becomes habit, if each mask becomes more comfortable than your bare face, does your true self exist? Or have you acted so long that you have become the acting? Let's slow down now. Imagine you were given a mask to wear. Only for a party, you put it on. At first, it feels strange, but the more you wear it, the more natural it seems. People react in different ways. They laugh more often. They listen more closely. They like you. With time, the mask becomes easier than your own face. You forget that it's there. And one day you try to take it off, but it does not move because you no longer remember where the mask ends and where you begin. This paradox is present in our daily lives. It lives in resumes, in dating apps, in the bios of social networks, in the curated version of ourselves that we share, that is liked, and that is approved. We put on confidence when we feel anxious. We put on kindness when we're angry. We put on certainty when we feel lost. We put on a smile when we are suffering. And we say to ourselves, that is how I am now. And maybe that's true, but maybe it's also camouflage. Maybe you've learned to survive by becoming what others need you to be. Some psychologists call this a false self, a version of yourself built to earn approval, avoid rejection, and ensure love. It is not deceitful. It is protective, but it comes at a cost. The more time you spend with the false self, the less you feel the real one. Until one day, someone asks you, what do you want? And you're paralyzed because you're so used to asking, what do they want me to want? The paradox worsens because masks aren't always bad. Sometimes they protect you. Sometimes they allow you to experiment, test confidence, simulate courage, move through spaces not built for your truth. In those moments, a mask is not a lie. It is a bridge between fear and possibility. But what begins as a bridge can become a cage. And soon you find yourself acting even when alone, smiling in the mirror, nodding in silence, writing your thoughts for an invisible public. You no longer know how to feel unless someone is watching. And when there's no one, you disappear. Here is the paradox in its entirety. The mask you wear to protect yourself becomes the self you feel safest with. And once it keeps you safe, you don't want to remove it. Even when it starts to hurt, even when it isolates you, even when it starts to suffocate what it's supposed to protect, you say, this is what I am. But deep down you wonder, is that true? This raises a most difficult question. Who are you when nobody needs anything from you? Without expectations, without performances, without an image to maintain. What about your voice, your thoughts, your posture? Do you even know them? Or does the silence seem too empty, too unknown? Because maybe you've spent so much time being observed that you've forgotten how to see yourself. Some try to resolve the paradox by saying there is no true self. You are all of your masks. You are the sum of your performances. Context defines identity. And maybe that's partly true. But if that's the case, why do you feel so exhausted? Why do you long for the people who make you feel like you can breathe? Why do you yearn for spaces where you don't have to offer explanations? Why do you feel relief when you are yourself? That relief points to something real, something underneath, something that cannot be represented, only revealed. Then, where's the exit then? It is not in tearing the mask off. That is just another performance. It is not in rejecting all adaptation. That is fear disguised as rebellion. The exit is softer. It is asking oneself, what parts of this are mine? What parts did I borrow? What parts did I invent to survive and no longer need? And then, moment to moment, let go of what no longer fits. Not all at once, just enough to feel your own face. Again, enough to breathe. You stand in front of the mirror, without audience, without script, just you. And maybe for the first time, you don't try being anything. You don't look for the mask. You let the silence remain in silence. And in that stillness, you feel something that you hadn't felt in a long time. Yourself. Not what they see, not what they want, just you. Without name, without interpreting, undeniably real. The Ship of Theseus. Imagine that you are standing at the edge of a quiet port just before dawn. The stars still shine in the dark sky, and the sea gently laps the ancient stone docks. You are contemplating a magnificent wooden ship with its tall masts, rolled sails, and hull gleaming with fresh varnish. The locals say that it is the same ship that once took the legendary hero Theseus home after battle. The same ship preserved throughout the centuries. Or is it something completely different? This is the paradox. Known as the Ship of Theseus, it has puzzled philosophers for more than 2,000 years. It is a question about identity, about the nature of change and continuity, and about whether something can remain fundamentally the same even when its parts change. At first glance, the answer might seem obvious. Of course, it is the same ship. It occupies the same space, fulfills the same function, and bears the same name. The continuity of its purpose and its legacy must count for something. But if you delve deeper, the certainty begins to crumble. Let's take this further. Let's imagine that all of the original planks and nails of the ship were carefully stored in a warehouse. Over time, someone begins to reassemble them, restoring each piece to its original place until the entire ship stands again, built entirely with the original materials. Now, there are two ships, one made with the pieces in which Theseus sailed, and another that has existed continuously at the port thanks to the replacement of pieces. Which is the true ship of Theseus? Some argue that the ship that remained at the port is the true one. It has a continuous history, without interruptions from disassembly or abandonment. Others claim that the reassembled version is more authentic. It contains the real matter on which Theseus sailed. But others say that neither is the ship of Theseus. Both are imposters in different ways. And now imagine this paradox applied to you. All the cells in a human body are replaced over time. The person you were 10 years ago no longer physically exists. Your memories may have changed. Probably your beliefs have also changed. Are you still the same person? If you replace the pieces slowly in sequence, does identity persist? If body and mind evolve completely, can the self endure? Is there something deeper, more essential, something like a soul? Or is identity nothing more than a story we tell ourselves, sewn with continuity and illusion? Some philosophers say that this paradox reveals a hidden truth, that identity is not rooted in substance, but in narrative, that what we call self or ship is nothing more than a convenient fiction, a continuity of functions and memories that allows us to make sense of change. We are not the same person we were 10 years ago, but the illusion of identity helps us survive, to relate, and to remember. Others disagree. They believe in essence that beneath the surface of parts and particles there is something indivisible, something that contains the core of identity, that can endure through transformation and remain itself. This paradox seems simple. It starts with wooden planks on a ship, but it takes us through corridors of thought that touch biology, metaphysics, consciousness, and even artificial intelligence. Because what if we build a machine, an AI, with replaceable modules and code? If we updated it over time, little by little, until nothing of the original remained, would it still be the same machine? Is there a point at which identity ends and something new begins? And what does that mean for our lives, our relationships, our values? If all things are constantly changing, always in transition, always slowly becoming something else, the ship of Theseus is silently at the center of all these questions. A simple story about a wooden ship that gives rise to a much deeper reflection on what it means to be the same, what it means to change, and whether both things are really separate. The paradox does not offer a clear answer, but perhaps that is the question. Perhaps the value lies not in the resolution, but in contemplation. In a way, it opens the mind gently, delicately, like the sea that slowly lifts a ship from its mooring. And as the stars fade and the morning light touches the horizon, the ship of Theseus waits. It waits in ports and mines, in museums and memories, always asking the same silent question. Am I still me? The grandfather paradox. And imagine walking alone along a path lit by the moon, with the trees around you swaying gently in a silent wind. Ahead, a strange glow breaks the air, a ripple like heat rising from the pavement. You take a step forward, and the world around you folds. When you open your eyes, it is no longer night. You are in the past. Not only in the past, but decades ago. And not in just any place. You are in front of a modest house. The house in which your grandfather lived before your parents were born. He is inside, young and oblivious to everything. And in your hand, trembling, you have the power to end his life before he meets your grandmother. Now pause. You have not done anything yet. But the simple fact of being here, of having that possibility, triggers a logical nightmare that philosophers, scientists, and narrators have debated for more than a century. It is called the grandfather paradox. This is the problem. Suppose you go back in time and prevent your grandfather from having children. If you succeed, your parents will never be born. And if your parents were never born, neither were you. But if you had never been born, how could you have traveled back in time to do it? This is the paradox, a loop that breaks itself. a cause that erases its own effect, an effect that undoes its own cause. It is like trying to burn a photograph before taking it or closing a door that has never been opened. The action destroys the conditions that made it possible in the first place. You become a contradiction, a walking impossibility. The implications go far beyond the simple idea of killing a grandfather. Replace that event with any change in the past, stealing an object, altering a decision, saving a life. If that change prevents you from being who you were when you traveled to the past, then the event that triggered your trip never happens. Therefore, you never return. Therefore, the change never happens. Therefore, everything returns to its previous state, and the loop repeats. And yet, the concept of time travel continues to tempt us. We dream of rewriting history, correcting mistakes, avoiding disasters. But this paradox reminds us that time can be more fragile and implacable than we want to believe. Some scientists and philosophers try to escape the paradox by suggesting alternative timelines. According to one theory, your act creates a branched universe. You do not erase your own future. You simply create a different one. In that version of reality, your grandfather dies and your family lineage becomes extinct. But the timeline from which you come, the one in which you existed, remains intact. This sounds promising, but raises a new question. If you can never return to your original timeline, have you really changed anything? Or have you simply abandoned your world and replaced it with a shadow? Others suggest that the universe has built-in safeguards. Perhaps time resists change. Perhaps you could try to alter the past, but some force would always intervene. Your weapon could fail. The car could break down. A stranger could stop you. Somehow, events would correct themselves, and history would remain intact. This idea, called the Novikov self-consistency principle, argues that any action you take in the past must already be part of the past. You can go back, but only to fulfill what has already happened. You're not rewriting the past. You are fulfilling it. But even this leads to disturbing implications. It suggests that free will could be an illusion, that everything, even your interference, is predetermined, that you were always destined to travel to the past, that you were always destined to try and fail. And still, the paradox haunts us because it does not require science fiction to seem real. It whispers in the silent corners of life. Regret, memories, nostalgia. We have all wanted to go back and undo something, say the right thing, take the other path, make a different choice. But what if that same desire, that longing to change the past, is based on something impossible? What if the past is not a place we can go, but a weight we must carry? The grandfather paradox not only challenges the laws of physics, it challenges our sense of identity, our understanding of cause and effect. It shakes the foundations of what it means to choose. If time is a river, the paradox asks, can we swim against the current without dissolving the current that brought us here? And so you find yourself again in front of that house, paralyzed and indecisive. Your grandfather's inside, knowing nothing. You are out of time, trapped between choice and contradiction. A moment suspended forever in the paradox. Because if you act, you erase the hand that reached the past. And if you erase it, who reached it? The liar's paradox. Imagine a room without windows or doors. Only smooth and infinite walls bathed in a cold, dim glow. In the center, there's a pedestal on which rests a single sheet of paper. You approach and read the sentence written with calm and deliberate ink. This sentence is false. At first, it seems quite simple, but as the words settle, something begins to twist. If the sentence is false, then what it says must not be true. But what it says is that it is false, which means that it must be true. But if it is true, then what it says is correct. And it says that it is false. Therefore, it must be false, which makes it true, which makes it false. You feel that the knot tightens. Each conclusion unravels the previous one. You are trapped in a whirlwind of logic without beginning or end. A single innocent sentence has dismantled the very foundations of truth and falsehood. This is the liar's paradox. It is one of the oldest paradoxes in Western philosophy, whose origins date back to ancient Greece. It is said that the philosopher Eubulides was the first to pose the enigma. A man says he is lying. Is what he says true or a lie? It is a sentence that contradicts itself. If it is true, it is a lie. If it is a lie, it is true. It refuses to be defined. It defies all resolution. And yet, the sentence is perfectly grammatical, perfectly clear. He does not use any trick, only the ordinary mechanism of language turned against itself. At first, it seems like a play on words, a playful curiosity. But like all the best paradoxes, it reveals something deeper, something disturbing about the fragile frameworks we use to navigate the world. The truth is supposed to be solid, a foundation, a binary. Something either is or is not. But the liar's paradox sits directly on that limit and flickers like a candle in a draft. It reveals a crack in logic, a seam where certainty breaks. Mathematicians have tried to isolate it. Philosophers have tried to reclassify it. But it remains stubborn, elusive, irresolvable. When formal logic was developed in the early 20th century, paradoxes like this posed a serious problem. If a sentence could be constructed that was both true and false, the entire system was at risk of collapsing. After all, in some logical frameworks, a single contradiction can crumble everything. If a statement can be both A and not A, what prevents the entire structure from being corrupted? In response, thinkers like Alfred Tarski proposed that truth is a stratified concept, that sentences about truth must exist in a hierarchy, and that no sentence can refer to its own veracity within the same level. In this framework, this sentence is false. It is not simply paradoxical, it is undefined. It tries to talk about itself in a way that language should not allow. But this solution seems like a retreat, like placing a sign that says, "Do not enter," in a dark hallway and declaring that the hallway has disappeared. The paradox remains like a whisper behind a closed door. Others resort to non-classical logic, introducing nuances between true and false, degrees, possibilities, logics in which contradiction is not fatal, but a kind of equilibrium. In these systems, a sentence can float in a quantum state, valid and invalid, meaningful and meaningless. And here is where the liar's paradox begins to resemble something almost spiritual. Because how many times in life do we find ourselves trapped between opposites that seem equally true, between love and pain, between memory and oblivion, between what we believe and what we fear? How many times do we say things that we know are partly lies and partly truths? We live in a world of contradictions. We build ourselves from stories that change according to the day, the mood, the public. We tell ourselves that we are good people, even when we act selfishly. We say that we are fine, even when we are falling apart. We say we are lying, and sometimes we are telling the truth. The liar's paradox is more than a sentence. It is a mirror. It shows us a place where certainty breaks, where the mind turns on itself, where meaning spins, unravels, and tightens again. And in that loop, there's a kind of beauty, a reminder that not everything has to be resolved, that some truths only exist in tension, that the sharpest clarity can be born from contradiction. You look again at the paper on the pedestal. This sentence is false. And for a moment, the room seems wider, deeper, stranger, because the sentence has no answer. And maybe you don't either. The barber's paradox. Imagine a small and quiet town nestled in a bend of a river, where the streets are always clean and all routines run like clockwork. In this town, there is only one barber. He is polite, efficient, always punctual, but he follows a peculiar rule, a rule written into the very fabric of this town's laws. The barber shaves all those and only those who do not shave themselves. At first glance, it seems like a fun little tradition, simple, elegant. The barber is responsible for keeping clean those who do not keep themselves clean. This ensures that no one is left unshaven and that no effort is wasted. A perfect system until one day someone asks a question. Who shaves the barber? A ripple is felt in the mind, a pause. Because if the barber does not shave himself, then, according to the rule, he must shave himself. But if he shaves himself, then he falls into the category of those who shave themselves, and, therefore, he must not shave himself. It is a loop, a contradiction, a paradox. This is the barber's paradox, introduced by the philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell at the beginning of the 20th century. In essence, it is a puzzle about self-reference, about systems that try to define themselves from within. It may seem frivolous, even absurd, but it arose from a deeper crisis. At that time, mathematicians were trying to formalize logic to create a perfect system in which all truths could be demonstrated and all questions had answers. But Russell realized something disturbing. Let's imagine a set, he said, that contains all the sets that do not contain themselves. Let's call this set R. If R contains itself, then, by definition, it should not contain itself. But if it does not contain itself, then it meets the requirements and must contain itself. Does it sound familiar to you? It was not just a philosophical riddle. This shattered the foundations of mathematics. It meant that, within a perfectly logical system, contradictions could still lurk. That even in the most rigorous structures, there could be unanswered questions, rules that fall apart the moment they are applied to themselves. Russell's paradox, like the barber's dilemma, highlighted something terrifying and fascinating, that there are limits to what systems can define, that sometimes the act of including something changes the category itself, that logic, when it turns towards itself, can collapse like a house of mirrors. And this is where the discomfort arises, because we live in systems, in language, in law, identity, thought, each built on rules, assumptions about how the world is organized, what is considered true, and who counts as what. But what happens when those rules refer to themselves? When we try to define who, we are using the same tools that we have built to explain the world, who belongs, who decides, who shaves the barber. We begin to see this paradox not only in towns or sets or logical riddles, but in daily life, in how we categorize ourselves, in how we draw lines between order and chaos, inclusion and exclusion, truth and contradiction. It resonates in bureaucracy, where rules prevent the exceptions they are supposed to allow, in governance, where systems collapse under the weight of their own procedures, in language, where definitions become entangled in themselves, even in identity, where being authentic often means complying with someone else's definition of authenticity. And yet, these are the structures in which we live. We depend on them. We build our days, our choices, our sense of identity on them. But somewhere in a quiet corner of our thinking, the question remains there. Who shaves the barber? Russell tried to solve the paradox by changing the rules of set theory. Others followed his example, building hierarchies, adding layers, creating systems that protect themselves from self-reference. These changes work for a while. But the paradox is patient because it does not only live in mathematics or logic. It lives in the circular thoughts from which we cannot escape, in the questions that are repeated, in the rules that are undone the moment we follow them. The barber's paradox is not just about a man with a razor. It is about the hidden limit where clarity breaks down, about the questions we ask that become traps, about the systems we trust and that silently contain their own ruin. It begins with a smile and ends in silence. The paradox of the unexpected hanging. Imagine you are a prisoner. You are sitting silently in your cell one morning when the judge visits you with an announcement. He tells you, you will be hanged at noon on a working day next week, but the exact day will be a surprise. You will not know the day of your execution until the executioner arrives at the door of your cell at noon. You nod slowly, feeling the weight of the sentence in your bones. But as soon as the judge leaves, something stirs in your mind. You start to reason. If the hanging has not taken place before Thursday night, then Friday must be the day. But if you know it has to be Friday, then it will not be a surprise. And if it cannot be a surprise, it cannot be Friday. So Friday is discarded now. Now think about Thursday. If Friday is no longer possible, Thursday would be the final remaining day. But if the hanging has not happened before Wednesday night, you know it must be Thursday. Again, it would not be surprise. So Thursday is discarded too. You continue this process now. Wednesday, Tuesday, even Monday, each day, once isolated, becomes predictable. And if predictable, it cannot be a surprise. Finally, you come to the conclusion that the hanging cannot happen. And so you stay calm. But then, one morning, say Wednesday, the door opens suddenly. The executioner is there in silence. You're left breathless now. You did not expect it today. And so, without more said, the sentence is executed. You're surprised now. The paradox is now complete. This is the paradox of the unexpected hanging. A logical riddle that dismantles its own reasoning. A contradiction not born from error, but from impeccable deduction that clashes with the unpredictable. Deep down, it is a paradox of knowledge, of expectations, of how we use logic to anticipate events, and of how that logic can trap us in a false sense of certainty. Because your reasoning step by step was impeccable. All the deductions seemed solid, but the conclusion that the hanging could not happen was wrong. The surprise did happen, and therefore, something in your reasoning must fail. But where? Some say the problem lies in surprise's definition. If you try to predict the unpredictable, you get entangled in a contradiction, as if you were trying to plan chaos, as if you were trying to expect the unexpected. Others argue the paradox reveals a defect in language use. How claims about knowledge and expectations can feed back, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The judge's statement sets a trap not only for the prisoner, but for logic. And the discomfort of the paradox does not end in cell. It extends to daily life. Think of deadlines, exams, promotions, endings. We try to anticipate when something happens. And if it defies our reasoning, we call it unfair or destiny. But maybe the universe does not play to our expectations. Maybe surprise is not something that can be solved. Just surrender to it. The paradox has crept into classrooms, courts, books, and newspapers. It resonates in economic predictions, military strategies, and even in the algorithms we use to predict behavior. Anywhere knowledge and uncertainty are intertwined, the unexpected ways. It is a reminder that the more we try to outwit unpredictability, the more we get entangled in it. That not everything can be prepared. That some things, by nature, resist being anticipated. And maybe that is not a defect, but design. Because the essence of surprise is its refusal to be pigeonholed by logic. It escapes from reason's guards. It goes through doors we thought closed. It does not arrive when we wait, but precisely when we have discarded it. And so you sit again in your cell, your gaze fixed on the door, trying to find a reason that leads to safety. But the paradox already knows this, and it will arrive when it wants. The infinite Hilbert Hotel. Imagine a hotel, a grandiose, endless structure that rises solitary on a dark plain under a sky dotted with stars. Its corridors extend to infinity. Its doors are carefully numbered, 1, 2, 3, and so on without end. This is the Hilbert Hotel, and it has an infinite number of rooms. Tonight, the hotel is full. All the rooms are occupied by a guest. However, despite this, a new traveler arrives, tired and hopeful, asking for a place to stay. The receptionist smiles. "Of course," she says. "We have rooms." She picks up the phone and makes an announcement. "Guest of room 1, please move to room 2. Guest of room 2, move to room 3. Guest of room 3, move to room 4." And so on. All the guests simply move to the next room, leaving room 1 free for the newcomer. Although the hotel was already full, it can accommodate one more. And then another bus arrives. This one carries an infinite number of new guests. The receptionist does not hesitate. She instructs each guest to move to the room whose number is double their current room. Room 1 moves to room 2. Room 2 moves to room 4. This is the infinite Hilbert Hotel, a thought experiment created by the German mathematician David Hilbert to show how strange and counterintuitive infinity can be. It begins with a simple idea, infinite space. But from there, logic twists in ways that defy our everyday intuition. A hotel that is full can still make room. A hotel that has no end can grow without growing. It is a place where subtraction does not always decrease, and addition does not always increase. It turns out that infinity does not behave like normal numbers. Think about it. If you remove all the odd guests from the hotel, half the guests are gone. But since there is still an infinite number of even guests left, the hotel is still as full. You have removed half of infinity, and yet you still have infinity. Now, imagine trying to count the total number of guests. You realize that there is no end. You will never finish. Even if you have removed guests or added more, the count never changes much, revealing something disturbing. Infinity is not a number. It is a process, a direction, a concept that breaks the arithmetic we believed unbreakable. And yet we try to use it in physics, in cosmology, in mathematics, and in theology. We speak of infinite space, infinite time, and infinite possibilities. But the Hotel de Hilbert reminds us how little we understand what these words truly mean. Because infinity is not just big. It is different. It resists finality. It extends beyond logic, beyond our capacity to contain it. And yet, it is familiar to us, isn't it? How many times have you felt overwhelmed by the infinity of time? How many times has your mind wandered through the vast, immeasurable expanse of possibilities, memories, or regrets? We carry infinities in our minds. In the future, we imagine. In the past, we revisit. In the dreams that refuse to take clear shapes. And thus, the hotel is at the limit of comprehension. Room after room, door after door, extending in an eternal corridor, always full, always ready, always impossible. It is a hotel that exists and cannot exist. A place where logic flickers, where numbers dance beyond meaning, where infinity not only lives, but moves. Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Imagine an old library, so vast and silent that time seems to slow when you enter. The shelves extend upwards beyond sight, spiraling toward the shadows. Each book is handwritten, each page full of equations, demonstrations, and theorems. You run your fingers over the spines and feel cold logic buzzing in air. A cathedral built with symbols and reason. In this library, the goal is simple: truth. And for centuries, mathematicians have tried to gather it all in one place to create a system, a perfect, complete, and hermetic logical structure where every true statement can be demonstrated and every falsehood can be refuted. A world without contradictions, without gaps, where truth is not something that is perceived or felt, but something that is demonstrated with steps, rules, and absolute clarity. But then a man enters the library, calm, without pretensions. His name is Kurt Gödel, and in 1931, he reveals something that shakes the very foundations of this sacred order. A paradox, a theorem, a warning. He demonstrates with surgical precision that this perfect system, this dream of total knowledge, is impossible. His demonstration is called the incompleteness theorem, and it begins disturbingly with a phrase that, like the liar's paradox, refers to itself. But this time it does not speak of truth or falsehood, but of demonstrability. It says, in effect, that this statement cannot be demonstrated. At first it sounds like a riddle, but Gödel does not leave it as a simple phrase. He turns it into mathematics. He encodes it using arithmetic and logic. He turns it into something that a machine or a formal system can process. And then he shows that if the system is coherent, if it does not admit contradictions, then this statement must be true. But if it is true and it says that it cannot be demonstrated, then it is a true statement that cannot be demonstrated within the system. And that means that the system is incomplete. However powerful logic may be, however rigorous the structure may be, there will always be truths that cannot be reached from within. Statements that are true but that are forever beyond our reach, undemonstrable, unattainable, like stars beyond a dark horizon. Gödel demonstrated that any system complex enough to describe basic arithmetic will contain these blind spots, and not just one, but infinite ones. You could try to expand the system, add new axioms, build a superior framework to capture the lost truths. But in doing so, you create a new system with its own blind spots, its own truths impossible to demonstrate. You're always chasing something that is beyond your reach. The paradox intensifies. In a way, Gödel's theorem is a mathematical version of humility. It tells us that even in the most formal systems, even in the most logical languages, there are limits. It is not just that we do not know everything. It is that we cannot know it. There will always be true statements that are beyond the reach of proof. And this realization has echoes far beyond mathematics. It applies to science, where each answer opens new questions, to philosophy, where each concept contains shadows that it cannot illuminate, to consciousness, where our thoughts can observe themselves, but never fully explain themselves. Even in artificial intelligence, Gödel's theorem looms over us. Because if you build a machine to reason, it will also find limits. However advanced it may be, it will face statements that it will not be able to resolve, truths that it cannot certify, walls that it cannot cross. And so, the library begins to look different, no less majestic, but more mysterious. Each book remains brilliant, remains vital. But now you understand that, however many volumes you write, however many tests you build, there will always be gaps. There will always be questions that will remain beyond the reach of the flashlight's light. Some scholars resisted at first. His proof was complex, his logic surgical. But over time, its beauty became undeniable. He had not broken a mathematics. He had revealed its deepest soul, and he had done it not by destroying logic, but by using it, turning the very rules of reason inward, just as Russell had done with sets, just as the liar's paradox had done with truth. But Gödel went further. He did not just create a paradox. He demonstrated that such paradoxes are inevitable, inherent, inescapable. It is as if the universe whispered through him. There are limits even here, even in mathematics, even in perfection. The incompleteness theorem does not leave us without hope, but it does change us. It asks us to reconsider the idea of certainty, of completeness, of what it means to know. Because if there are truths that cannot be proven, how do we relate to them? Do we ignore them? Do we accept them? Do we look for them anyway? Is that not what it means to be human? To keep going even when we know we will never reach the limit. To write even when we know that the book will never be finished. To believe in things, in love, in meaning, in beauty that no system can fully define or capture. In this sense, the Gödel paradox is not the end of the dream. It is its deepening, a reminder that wonder does not disappear when certainty is broken. Sometimes that is where it begins. The Monty Hall paradox. Imagine you're standing on a stage. Bright lights above your head. The murmur of an invisible public around you. In front, 3 huge doors rise above the studio floor. Door 1, Door 2, and Door 3. Behind one of them, there is a new car. Behind the other 2, goats. The host of the program, charming, smiling, and self-confident, approaches you. He explains the rules to you. You choose a door. Next, he will open one of the 2 remaining doors, revealing a goat. After, you'll have the option to stay with your original choice or change to the other unopened door. You nod. You are ready. It is a game of chance, and the probabilities are fair. 1 in 3. You choose door 1. The presenter pauses, smiles, and opens door 3. Behind it is a goat lazily chewing. The audience laughs. Now, the presenter turns to you with a raised eyebrow. Do you want to switch or stay? And here is where the paradox begins, because your instinct tells you that the probabilities are now 50%. 2 doors remain. One hides a car, and the other a goat. It doesn't matter which you choose now, does it? It is not that way. The mathematically correct decision, the one that doubles your chances to win, is to switch. And, nevertheless, that feels incorrect. Deeply and stubbornly incorrect. This is the Monty Hall paradox, named for the television program Let's Make a Deal, in which contestants face this same scenario. In essence, it is a paradox between probability and perception, between logic and instinct. Let's analyze this. When you chose door 1, there was a 1 in 3 probability that the car was behind it. That means that there was a 2 in 3 probability that the car was behind one of the other 2 doors. That probability doesn't disappear just because a door is opened. It is important to highlight that the presenter always reveals a goat and always has an option. His knowledge of where the car, is influences which door he opens. So when he opens door 3 and reveals a goat, he hasn't reset the game to 50/50ths. He has given you new information. Information that changes the probabilities in favor of the door you did not choose. By switching, you are now choosing between a probability of 2/3 instead of 1/3. And nevertheless, the majority of people stay. Even when the mathematics are explained to them, even when the simulations are shown to them, even when they play again and again and see the pattern emerge, they stay because our minds struggle with conditional probability. We prefer clean cuts, simple categories. We resist the idea that information affects the probabilities. We treat each moment as if it were a blank slate, even though it is not. The Monty Hall paradox takes advantage of the dissonance between how probability works and how we think it should. It attracts us toward a false sense of equality. It whispers to us that we are safe, that it doesn't matter, that everything has reset. But it is not that way. The past continues to resonate. The presenter's knowledge matters. And the paradox is not only in contests, but also in our lives. Let's think about how we evaluate decisions, how we hold on to our first option out of loyalty, pride, or fear of regret. Even when new information emerges, we often stubbornly and irrationally stay on our original path. We don't want to admit that we were wrong. We don't want to seem foolish. We prefer the illusion of control to the discomfort of reevaluation. So we stay, and the goat waits. In this way, the Monty Hall paradox becomes more than just a mathematical puzzle. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of how we resist uncertainty, how we cling to our initial beliefs, how we confuse justice with equality, and it whispers a silent lesson to us. The world is not always intuitive. The truth is not always what seems right. Sometimes, doubling your possibilities means leaving your comfort zone. Sometimes, the intelligent decision seems the incorrect one. And sometimes the door you did not choose is the one that leads to freedom. You find yourself again before the doors. The public is silent. The presenter waits. One door is yours, the other better. Do you stay or change? The teleportation paradox. Imagine this. It is the future. You are inside an elegant, silent chamber on Earth. Before you is the teleporter, promising an instantaneous trip to Mars. No rockets, no years of flight. You just have to enter here and exit there. You hesitate, hands suspended near the console. The process is explained in detail. The machine will scan every atom of your body, every molecule, every neuron, every electrical impulse from your brain. It will capture the precise structure of your memories, thoughts, identity. Then, at the speed of light, it will transmit that information to a receiver on Mars, where another identical machine will recreate you. The same thoughts, the same feelings, the same scars, the same heartbeat, the same breathing. At the same time, your original self, the one standing here, will disintegrate painlessly, molecule by molecule, will disappear. But nothing happens, they say, because the person on Mars will be you. Exactly you. You pause because the words are fluid, but something worries you. The teleportation paradox raises a truly chilling question. If the person who is on Mars is identical in all aspects, is it really you? Or is it a perfect copy that is on another planet believing that it is you, while you've been erased silently and permanently? It is a mental experiment separating identity from continuity, replacing movement with destruction, that rethinks transport as duplication and death. At first, it seems like a technology problem, but delving deeper, it becomes much stranger. Because what makes you you? Is it your body? The cells that move, change, die, and regenerate? Are they your memories? The ever-changing narrative your brain weaves to make sense of the world? Is it your consciousness, that elusive sensation of being? And if all that can be copied perfectly, does identity really exist? Or is it just an illusion? Imagine now that the disintegration fails. The machine scans you perfectly, transmits the data, builds the replica on Mars, but the original survives. Now there are two of you, both with your memories, both thinking they're the real one, both claiming to be you. Which of the two is right? And if there are two equally convinced, equally valid, what does that say about the self? The paradox forces us to face a deep discomfort, that perhaps you are not a singular thing, but rather a pattern, a structure, a continuity that, in theory, can be replicated. It suggests that identity is not linked to matter, but to disposition. But if that is true, what are you afraid of? If the person on Mars wakes, remembers your past, feels your love, your fears, your sense of self, haven't you survived? But if you, the one in the chamber, continue existing, continue feeling, and are about to be erased, haven't you died? It is both survival and death, continuity and annihilation. The teleportation paradox crosses the limits of logic and emotion. It confronts the mind against the soul, the pattern against the person. It reveals the silent terror of the idea that we are not unique flames, but copies of patterns flickering in time. The philosopher Derek Parfit used this thought experiment to question personal identity. He argued that what matters is not strict identity, but psychological continuity. If your thoughts, beliefs, desires, and memories continue in another brain, in another place, then that is what survives. And if that is true, perhaps death is not as clear as we believe. But others rebel. They argue that no copy, however perfect, can replace the original. That there is something irreducibly yours in the experience of your own continuity. That once broken, even for a moment, the thread breaks. The self disappears. You can build a replica, but you cannot recover the sensation of being yourself. And what about ethics? If teleportation is common, are we committing mass suicide in the name of convenience? Are we deceiving ourselves to take a step towards death, smiling, calm for the pattern and the code? And what about choice? If there are two yous, which one stays with your family, your relationships, your responsibilities? What happens when the other you, alone on a red planet, begins to diverge? A slightly different environment, a slightly different path, a self that divides in two. Over time, you become strangers and then rivals. The paradox becomes more pressing because it is not just a science fiction problem. It resonates in real life. Every time you sleep and wake up, is that continuity or interruption? Every time you forget and relearn and forget again, are you or someone new? Every time you change, even a little, what is preserved? What is lost? Aren't we slowly teleporting, molecule by molecule, day to day? Parfit once wrote that personal identity is not what matters, that the self is not something permanent. And once we accept that, we may be less afraid of death, less attached to the illusion of a unique and permanent I. But in the silence of the chamber before the machine is activated, you don't feel philosophical. You feel fear, not of Mars, nor of the copy, but of being erased gently, silently, while someone else takes your place believing that it is you. The teleportation paradox is not just about machines. It is about consciousness, about the gap between structure and soul, about the horror of being copyable and the tragedy of being unique. And as the machine turns on, you are left with a question that no logic can solve. If someone else remembers your life, does that mean you survived or disappeared? The Barry paradox. Imagine you are alone in a dark studio with oak panels, surrounded by dusty books and the silent scratching of thoughts. There is no movement, no wind, only the sound of your pen sliding across the paper as you begin to write a list. Your goal is to write all the numbers that can be defined in fewer than 20 words. Not calculated, nor derived, only defined. For example, the number of planets in the solar system is a description. The square of 3 is another. You are not writing equations. You are writing phrases. Phrases in simple English that uniquely identify a specific number. It works well. Write down the first prime number greater than 100. The smallest number divisible by all digits from 1 to 9. The number of degrees in a right angle. Each description is clear, concise, and brief. Fewer than 20 words. But then, a phrase occurs to you. A strange, self-referential phrase. The smallest number that cannot be described in fewer than 20 words. You pause. It is a neat phrase of only 13 words, and it is clear what it tries to do. It refers to the smallest number that cannot be described in fewer than 20 words. But if this phrase successfully describes said number and does so in fewer than 20 words, then it can be described in less than 20 words, which means that it should not be on the list because it does not meet the requirements. But if it does not meet the requirements, if it really is the smallest number that cannot be described in fewer than 20 words, then this description must fail. But it doesn't fail. It's there. You yourself have written it down. 13 words, defined, concise. And so, the paradox turns inward. This is Barry's paradox, named after an Oxford librarian who, according to the story, was once perplexed by this same strange loop. But it was the mathematician G.G. Barry and, later, Bertrand Russell who helped bring it to light and frame it as a deeper and more disturbing inconsistency in the foundations of language, logic, and mathematics. At first glance, it seems innocent, even funny, just a linguistic trick. But the implications are deeper because this paradox isn't about numbers. It's about definitions. It is about the act of describing, categorizing, naming, and what happens when language turns against itself. The phrase, the smallest number that cannot be described in less than 20 words, is a kind of logical trap. It seems obvious. It uses simple words, but does something odd. It refers to a limitation of language within language itself. And that is where problems begin. Let us now imagine that we're trying to formalize all mathematics, as the logicians tried to do at the beginning of the 20th century. Their goal was to build a perfect system in which all statements could be categorized, proven, or disproven using strict definitions. But then Barry's paradox appears, because any system that allows reference to the concept of description length or definability opens the door to contradictions. And the moment your system can describe its own limits, it becomes vulnerable to paradoxes such as this. It is similar to Russell's paradox, in which sets that contain themselves fail, and to Gödel's incompleteness theorem, according to which certain truths cannot be proven within the system that defines them. But Barry's paradox is subtler. It does not break logic by force alone. It formulates it from within itself. Let's slow down. When you say that the smallest number that cannot be described in less than 20 words, you are creating a reference, a pointer to a specific number. But in doing so, you describe it now. And if the description is shorter than 20 words, you have contradicted the very premise of the phrase, the paradox of the two envelopes. Imagine this scenario. You are sitting at the table. In front of you are two envelopes, identical, sealed, impeccable. You are told that inside one of them there's a certain amount of money, say $100, and that inside the other there is exactly twice or half that amount. You don't know which is which. You are invited to pick one. Do it. You lift the left envelope and hold it carefully in your hand. They let you open it. Inside, you find $100. Now a voice says, you can keep it or exchange it for the other envelope. And suddenly, something strange happens. Your mind starts to spin. If the envelope you chose contains the smaller amount, then the other must contain $200. If yours contains the larger amount, then the other has 50. Therefore, the other envelope is worth double or half. You start calculating. Let's say there's a 50% chance that it is the smaller amount and a 50% chance that it is the larger. Then, the expected value of the other envelope is 0.5 asterisk $50 plus 0.5 asterisk $200, which is equivalent to $125. And suddenly, changing looks better. Although you already have $100, the average of the other envelope seems to be $125. So you change. But now the same logic applies. The envelope in your hand could be the smallest. The other could contain double that. You do the calculations again, and changing seems smart again. You change again and again. You're trapped in a loop, a paradox, a system in which changing always seems better, no matter what you have. This is the two-envelope paradox. It seems trivial, almost like a trick. But the more you delve, the more disturbing it becomes, because it seems to offer an infinite advantage from a finite choice, an endless improvement in a system without changes. It raises a question. How can the same logic apply regardless of the envelope you choose? And it highlights something deeper. How our expectations, especially mathematical ones, can betray us. Let's analyze this carefully now. When you calculate the expected value of the other envelope, you assume it is equally likely to contain half or double your amount. It seems fair, but a small flaw hides in that assumption. Let's go back now. You open the envelope and find $100. Now you say, if this is the smaller amount, the other has $200. If this is the larger amount, the other has $50. But wait, that logic assumes the possibility of a $50 envelope. But is that so? Did the original configuration allow such a low number? What if the game only used $100 and $200 or $1,000 and $2,000 without knowing the range of possible values? Your calculation is incorrect. You are applying logic to a system you do not fully understand. And there is the crux. Your expectation is based on an assumption that the probability of doubling and halving has the same weight, regardless of the value. But this cannot be true in the entire range of possible amounts because there is no lower limit. You can have infinity, but the duplication goes up endlessly. This unlimited expectation breaks down the logic. Mathematically, you're trying to assign the same probability to asymmetric results. And the result is a paradox, a system in which changing always seems better, even though it cannot be. It is not just a trick, but a mirror. Because the two envelopes paradox reveals how we process uncertainty, how we make decisions with incomplete information, how we are seduced by averages, expectations, and potential gains, even when the system is flawed. Think about how many times we do this in finance, in gambling, in negotiation. We look at results. We weigh probabilities. We pursue the highest expectations. But we often ignore the context, the structure behind the numbers, the limits, the configuration. We assume there is balance where there is asymmetry. We assume there is justice where there is not. And this paradox reminds us that expectations alone are not enough. Understanding is needed. Structure is needed. Without it, envelopes are only exchanged forever, chasing ghosts of value. There are ways to solve the paradox. Mathematicians suggest that your estimate of the expected value is meaningless unless you know the prior distribution, the rule by which the amounts of the envelopes were chosen. Without that, your assumption of a 50% probability is unfounded. Others take a Bayesian approach, suggesting that your initial belief about the possible amounts should influence your decision, that perhaps you should not assume equal probabilities in an indefinite infinity. Others, however, say that this paradox has nothing to do with mathematics. It is about philosophy, about decision-making under conditions of ignorance, of the very act of weighing one mystery against another mystery. And it all starts with two envelopes, identical, closed, silent, both full of potential, each asking to be opened. And you, the one who chooses, trapped forever between them, trying to calculate the meaning of the unknown. It is the purest form of paradox, a choice that reveals nothing, a logic that repeats itself eternally, a problem that cannot be solved without leaving it. So the voice returns, you have changed again and again, but this time it tells you that you must choose. No more changes, no more averages, just action. And now you realize that the paradox was never about the envelopes. It was about you. The Raven paradox, the Hempel paradox. Imagine a scientist in a quiet clearing in the forest. She is conducting an experiment. Her hypothesis is that all ravens are black. She waits, watching carefully. Time passes, the branches sway, and then she sees a raven. It is black. She nods, takes note, a fact that supports her hypothesis. Later, she sees another raven. Again black, then another, and another more. All black. Her confidence grows. But then something strange happens. She passes by a small farm. Outside, she sees an object, a green apple. It is not a raven, just a fruit. And, curiously, that apple also supports her hypothesis. Why? Because the statement, all ravens are black, is logically equivalent to all things that are not black are not ravens. If all objects that are not black also turn out not be ravens, that supports the idea that ravens are only black. Therefore, The green apple that clearly is not a raven counts as proof. This is the Hempel paradox, also known as the raven paradox. It seems ridiculous. How can a green apple tell you something of raven color? It seems like nonsense, but logically it's valid. Let's analyze this. There's a branch of philosophy and logic called confirmation theory. It's the study of how tests support or refute a hypothesis. And in formal logic, if two affirmations are logically equivalent, then tests confirming one should also confirm the other. Thus, if hypothesis A, all ravens are black, is logically equivalent to hypothesis B, everything not black is not a raven, then anything confirming B should confirm A. A white shoe, which is not a raven, confirms that hypothesis. A yellow banana, which is not a raven, confirms that hypothesis. A pink balloon, which is not a raven either. Technically, everything not black that is not a raven seems to support the hypothesis. However, there is something that just does not fit. It is not necessary to see all bananas to believe in black ravens. It is necessary to see more ravens. It is an instinctive reaction, but it reveals something deeper. It is the conflict between formal logic and intuition, between what rules say and what seems significant. Because your mind does not treat all tests equally. It asks, what does this really tell me? And when you see a green apple, it tells you nothing new. Of course, it is not a raven. You are not asking about green apples. You are asking about ravens. So, why does logic say the opposite? The answer lies in probability and in Bayesian reasoning. While it is true that a green apple fits the logical pattern, it adds very little weight to the hypothesis. It is about the informative value. Seeing one more black raven directly reinforces your belief. But seeing a million green apples barely moves the needle because objects that are not black and are not ravens are everywhere. They are expected. They are common. They do not test the limits of your affirmation. So, although the logic is solid, the confirmation's weak. This is where logic and probability diverge. One cares about structure, the other about probability. And this is where the paradox begins to reveal itself as something bigger. Because it is not only about birds. It is about how we form beliefs. It asks, what counts as evidence? How do we update our knowledge? When does the observation matter? Imagine you are a doctor making a diagnosis. Each symptom points to a possible cause. Now, imagine someone enters without symptoms. Does that help? Technically, yes. Reduce the list, but it doesn't seem to help because what we seek is contrast. The information that challenges our expectations, that separates one theory from another, reshapes the mental map we have of the world. And that is what the green apple fails to achieve. It follows the rule, but it does not reshape your understanding at all. Therefore, you ignore it completely. You trust your intuition over logic. And in most cases, you do fine. But this creates a tension, because how many other situations are hidden in everyday life in which the same dissonance silently distorts our judgment? How often do we discard evidence because it seems irrelevant to us, even when they are structurally valid? How many times do we overvalue dramatic signals and underestimate subtle ones? How many times do we trust what seems a confirmation instead of what it truly is? Hempel's paradox forces us to think more clearly about clarity itself. It challenges the idea that logic aligns with meaning and exposes fragile beliefs. How easily it can be shaped not by truth, but by how truth is presented. Some philosophers argue the paradox resolves by going beyond binary confirmation. Instead of asking if this confirms, we should ask how strongly it confirms. In that framework, the green apple barely matters. Others suggest that logic should be reformulated, that it is a mistake to treat logical equivalence as equivalence of evidence. Others say the real problem is language, that all ravens are black is not a perfect logical statement, but a human approximation, and that trying to fit it into rigid formal logic only creates illusions. But the paradox remains a reminder that evidence is not just about facts, but context, not only of what is seen, but of why it matters. And perhaps that's the lesson, that knowing something means more than simply collecting confirmations. It means understanding uncertainty structure, It means knowing not only what is true, but why it feels true to you. So you are back and clear now. The scientist observes the waiting trees, and then a flash of wings. A raven perches on a branch, as black as ink. Another note, another piece of data point. And far away, in the corner of your eye, a child bites a green apple. Logic says it matters, but your heart says no. And in the space between the two, the paradox still persists. Everything starts with a box, sealed, silent, still inside. Inside is a cat, and, with it a device, a strange contraption connected to a small amount of radioactive material, a Geiger counter, a flask of poison, and a hammer. This device is built with one rule. There is a 50% chance that, in the next hour, the radioactive atom disintegrates. If it disintegrates, the Geiger counter activates the hammer, which breaks the flask, releasing the poison and killing the cat. If the atom does not disintegrate, the mechanism does nothing at all. The cat lives on. But here's the trick now. You can't look inside yet. You can't open the box yet. Not yet, no. And until you do, in what state is the cat really? Is it dead? Or alive? Or something in between those states? This is Schrödinger's cat, yes. Perhaps the most famous paradox in quantum physics now. It was never conceived as a real answer. It was a criticism, a way of showing how absurd applying quantum theory is to everyday life. But it became much more than a criticism. It became a window into the nature of reality and the limits of what we know. In a quantum world, things act very differently from what we're used to. Particles exist in superpositions, states where they are neither one thing nor another, but both. A particle can spin up or down. It can be here and also not here. Only when we observe it, only when we measure it, does the superposition collapse to a single result. Before that, the particle exists in a cloud of possibilities. Now imagine applying that logic to the cat. The atom has a 50% chance to disintegrate. Until you check, it is in a quantum superposition of disintegrated and not disintegrated, which means the cat is in a superposition of being alive and dead. It is neither alive nor dead. It is not uncertain, but both things simultaneously until the box opens, until an observation is made. This is not a metaphor. It is the essence of quantum mechanics, a theory that has been tested countless times, always with the same strange results. And yet, we cannot accept it. We look at the box and demand that the cat be something. Reality cannot be both things at once. But from a quantum point of view, it can. The cat, this living being with breathing, heartbeat, warm fur, becomes an emblem of something deeper. The uncomfortable border between the observed world and the world that exists without observation. What is reality when no one is watching? Does the moon exist if no one sees it? Does the wave collapse if no mind observes it? These questions sound poetic, but they are not. They are at the center of some of the deepest debates in physics and philosophy. Some interpretations say that observation is key, that consciousness causes collapse, that the universe waits for a mind to observe it before deciding on a result. Others say that all possibilities occur, that each result creates a new branch of the universe, a new reality. This is the many worlds interpretation. According to this vision, when you open the box, there are two versions of you. One that finds a dead cat, another that finds it alive. Both results exist, but in different worlds. And suddenly, the box becomes a portal, not to death or life, but to the multiverse, a quiet cardboard door to infinite versions of truth. But even without multiple worlds, the paradox persists. Because Schrödinger's cat is not really about cats. It is about the relationship between knowledge and being. It is about how our act of observing, our curiosity, our interference, our measurement changes what exists. Before opening the box, the system is clean, intact. It is a mixture of possibilities. But the moment you look, it collapses. One truth wins, the other disappears. You not only know the result, but you determine it. And this raises a deeper question. What else in life behaves like this? What else exists in superimposed states until we force a resolution? Are our identities like that? Our emotions? Our future? How many things live in a silent box in our mind? Both this and that, until an election, a confrontation, a moment of clarity collapses them into one. You think you are brave until the moment arrives. You think you love someone until the truth is told. You think you know who you are until the mirror looks back at you. And every time a superposition collapses, there is something tragic in the cat because it does not choose. Wait, it lives and does not live depending on forces that it cannot see. It is everything and nothing. In a way like us, we move through life amid possibilities without knowing which path is the true one until we travel it, without knowing what version of ourselves will emerge until the moment demands it. And sometimes we never open the box. We live next to it. We imagine what is inside. We fear it. We adore it. But we never look because once we do, the other version dies. And a part of us regrets that collapse, even when the result is what we wanted, because possibility is beautiful and irreversible. So the box waits. It waits in scientific laboratories, in mental experiments, in relationships, in unmade decisions, in unspoken words. It waits in the space between what could be and what is. Schrodinger's cat is not just about quantum mechanics. It is about the price of knowing, the fragility of truth, the disturbing tension between certainty and possibility. You're in front of the box. Breathe and reach for the lid. And you wonder who you will be when the box opens. And what must die for the truth to live? The grown paradox. Imagine you are a scientist. Calm, methodical, rational, cataloging the world. One observation after another. You notice something. Emeralds. One after another. You observe them in museums and mines, in the mud of the rivers, and in the folds of ancient jewels. You see green, always green. You begin to formulate a theory. All emeralds are green. It fits with the evidence. All the emeralds you have found are green. There is no reason to think otherwise. You publish your findings. They are accepted. They become part of human knowledge. But then a philosopher knocks on your door and offers you a word you have never heard before. Grown. What is grown? You ask. And the philosopher explains to you that an object is grew if it is observed before January 1st, 2050, and is green, or it is observed after that date and is blue. So an emerald is grew if it is now green, but only as long as it turns blue later. You are left confused. The philosopher continues, until now all emeralds you saw have been green. That means they were also grew because observed before 2050 and were green. Therefore, they meet the grew definition. You nod slowly, but the philosopher insists. Your evidence supports the theory that all emeralds are green, but also supports the theory that all emeralds are grew. Both are consistent with data. So why do you think they're green and not grew? This is the grew paradox proposed by philosopher Nelson Goodman in the mid-20th century. And it doesn't seem dangerous at first. It seems like a linguistic trick, a clever redefinition. But the more you think about it, the more something deep, something disturbing catches your attention. Because it's not about wordplay. It is a question about induction, about how we form beliefs on patterns. And it threatens the very foundations of scientific reasoning. Induction is how we learn from the world. We observe patterns. We form general rules. We expect the future to resemble the past. That's how we know that the sun will rise tomorrow, that fire burns, that water wets, that emeralds are green. But the grew paradox breaks that process. It introduces a new predicate, one that changes depending on time, and shows that any regular pattern can be replaced by another equally coherent and logical, but leading to very different expectations. Because if you accept green as valid property, why not accept grew? After all, both have same evidence. You have never seen a blue emerald, but you also have not seen an emerald after 2050. So how do you know they won't turn blue? If you say, they have always been green, so they will continue to be green, the philosopher responds, they have always been grew, so they will turn blue. You have been caught. And suddenly, induction, that silent pillar of knowledge, begins to tremble. The paradox of grew teaches us that tests alone are not enough. That how we describe our theories determines how we interpret reality. It uncovers the hidden assumptions in our thinking, especially the assumption that some properties are more natural or real than others. You think green is simple, basic, intuitive. But that's because you've grown up in a world where green has been taught, used, and reinforced to you. You have never been asked to see the GRU. But the universe does not come with labels. We add them. And if we could define GRU, why not bleen? Blue before 2050, green after. Why not rounded? Something that is smooth before it's round. Why not thorny? Prickly until it is purple. Suddenly, the world dissolves into an ocean of possible predicates, all logically coherent, all supported by the same data, all demanding your trust. So which one do you believe? Which ones seem real to you? Which ones would you bet your life on? The paradox challenges not only language. It challenges certainty. Question: why do we believe the future resembles the past? What is considered a valid prediction? What makes one theory better than another if both fit data? These are not trivial questions. They are at the heart of science, philosophy, and AI. They harass weather forecasts, economic models, climate science, and disease forecasting. Every time we say something will happen because it has, we invoke induction. And every time we do, the ghost of GRU flickers behind the phrase. So how do we escape this paradox? Some argue that green is a more natural property that refers to a physical wavelength, a specific interaction with light, while GRU is disjunctive, artificially joined from two unrelated concepts. According to this point of view, green originates in physical reality and GRU does not. But that raises the question, what defines naturalness? Why do we believe that the wavelength of reflected light is the appropriate basis for induction and not time-dependent behavior? What if we lived in a world where colors changed with the seasons or where elements mutated every year? In that world, GRU might seem more natural than green. Our language would evolve to reflect that reality. So again, what do we trust? Do we trust the past? Do we trust our words? Do we trust our instinct? The paradox of GRU not only confuses, but unsettles because it reveals how little our knowledge is based on certainty and how much it is based on trust. Trust in regularity, trust in meaning, trust in labels that we cannot fully justify, but that we need to survive. And yet, despite all this, you return to the emerald. You hold it in your hand. It is green. You think it will continue to be green. You cannot prove it, but you trust it. And perhaps that is the quiet resolution that some paradoxes are not meant to be resolved. They should only be understood, lived, and learned. The paradox of GRU does not destroy induction. It makes us humble about it. It reminds us that every belief, however logical, carries an assumption. That knowledge is never free of bias. That every observation comes wrapped in a wrapping of language, perspective, and expectations. We do not see the world as it is. We see it through lenses that we barely perceive. And sometimes those lenses have names like green and other times like grown. The mere paradox of addition. The repugnant conclusion. Imagine a small, perfect society. A world where everyone lives long, healthy, and fulfilling lives. There is harmony, beauty, and freedom. Each person has access to art, love, friendship, a purpose. Let's call this population A. Now imagine another world, population B, where everyone is still happy, still has lives worth living, but just a little less. Perhaps slightly shorter lives, slightly less comfortable with slightly fewer opportunities for joy, but there are twice as many people, and overall, the total sum of happiness is greater. Would you say that population B is better? Most people hesitate. Lives are worse individually, but collectively, there is more well-being, more total joy. Now, imagine population C. Even more people. Each person has a life worth living, but only a little pleasure, no great beauty, but not deep suffering either. Only enough well-being to be above the line. And there are billions, trillions, so many people that the total happiness surpasses the smallest joy of the smallest populations. Now the paradox arises because logic, moral mathematics, seems to say that a large population with lives that are barely worth it is better than a small population with beautiful and rich lives. This is the paradox of mere addition, also known as the repugnant conclusion, introduced by philosopher Derek Parfit. This paradox challenges one of our most basic moral intuitions, that quality matters more than quantity, that a meaningful life is worth more than superficial ones. But mathematics does not agree. Let's analyze this. If you believe in utilitarianism, the moral vision that we must maximize general happiness, then more happiness is better, even if sparsely distributed. If 10 lives each contain 1 unit of joy and 1,000 lives contain 0.2 units, then 1,000 is better overall, even if no one is particularly happy. So the logic of aggregation pushes us towards strange conclusions. It says that a world with 10 billion moderately satisfied people is better than one with 1 billion deeply happy people. A world with 1 trillion lives barely worth it is even better. The ideal future is one in which there are as many people as possible, each living a life barely better than nothing. And this seems incorrect, repugnant, but it follows from mathematics, unless the mathematics are questioned. Philosophers and ethicists have debated this issue for decades. Some propose average utilitarianism, which argues that the best world is one in which average well-being is higher, not the total. That would preserve the smaller, richer populations. But average utilitarianism has its own horrors. What if average happiness could be increased by eliminating the least happy people? Suddenly, killing becomes moral if it improves the average. That seems worse. Others suggest that moral value is not cumulative, that happiness does not accumulate like coins, that beyond a point, adding more lives does not increase moral value. But this also raises questions. What is the threshold? Isn't it worth creating one more person with a good life? What if it's your son? What if it's you? And so we enter a spiral. The paradox resists resolution because it highlights a fracture between two ways of thinking. Mathematics, in which values can be added, compared, and classified. The human one, in which quality, dignity, and meaning define numbers. And in the center is a simple question. Should we prefer a huge world with simply acceptable lives to a small one with extraordinary lives? It's not just about philosophy. This is reflected in real political decisions, in economics, in climate science, and in healthcare. Do we save one person from suffering or improve the lives of many a little? Do we preserve quality or expand quantity? Do we invest in creating new lives or in improving the ones we have? And when we imagine the future of humanity, of consciousness, of civilizations, what kind of world do we want? A poetic and vibrant world with 10 billion people living intensely, or a universe full of quadrillions of minds that only experience flashes of satisfaction? Parfit did not offer a definitive answer. He only showed how the paradox breaks our intuitions, how it turns mere addition, the simple fact that there are more people with a decent life, into something strange, something incorrect, and yet not logically incorrect, only emotionally and existentially. So maybe the question isn't mathematical. Maybe it's about how we value experience. Is it sacred, singular, indivisible? Or is it cumulative, something that, when distributed among billions, keeps adding something grandiose? Perhaps the problem isn't in the logic. Perhaps it lies in our inability to imagine the scale. We can feel the life of a person. We can imagine the joy of 10. But a billion, we do not know what it means. We're not made to worry this much. And perhaps that is okay. Perhaps ethics should not rest on perfect equations. Perhaps it should rest on connection. And in a world with 10,000 million superficial lives, where nobody sings, where nobody loves deeply, where nobody even imagines what could have been, perhaps what we lose is not only the beauty. Perhaps we lose the capacity for worry. The mere paradox of the sum does not ask you to choose. It asks you to see. See the tension between reason and feeling, between growth and meaning, between what can be justified and what must be justified. And it leaves you with a quiet, impossible question. What kind of future do we owe the lives that do not yet exist? The doomsday paradox, the self-sampling assumption. It starts with a number. Not a number that you know, but one that knows you. A number that marks your place in history. Not in years, but in people. You were born. You are alive. And that means you are somewhere in the sequence of all the human beings that will ever live. Are you among the first? Are you among the last? Are you in the middle? You do not know. But here is a twist. The simple fact of knowing that you are alive and thinking about your place in the timeline of humanity could tell you something about the future of humanity. This is the doomsday paradox, or more formally, the self-sampling assumption. And it works like so. Imagine that you're in a line. You do not know how long the line is, but you know your position. Let's say you are person number 60. Now, would you guess that the line has 100 people or a million? Based solely on probability, it seems more likely that you are near the center and not at the beginning or end. Statistically, it is rare to be at the start of a long sequence. Now apply that logic to humans. So far, approximately 117 billion people have lived. That is your approximate position in humanity's line. If you assume that you are a random sample of all the human beings that will live, it is unlikely that you are in the first tiny fraction of the total. Therefore, logic says that the total number of human beings that will live is probably not trillions or quadrillions. It is probably something close to the present. The conclusion: the end is nearer than we think. At first, it sounds ridiculous. A mathematical game, a trick of perspective, but it worsens because it is not based on politics, climate science, or war. It does not matter how the end comes. It only matters that if you are randomly placed in the timeline of humanity, your current position suggests your total life will be shorter. Just as being near the start line suggests that the line is not very long. And so, from the fact that you are alive now, you can deduce something chilling. The future for humanity could be limited. Not in thousands of years, not in billions, but soon. The paradox is very controversial. Some dismiss it, others call it statistical nonsense, but others, scientists, philosophers, even cosmologists, take it seriously enough to debate it because the underlying logic is clear. The question is, what should you believe about the future based on your current situation? What do your own birth and consciousness tell you? Not about you, but about us. And the answer is uncomfortable. The doomsday paradox arises from a principle known as anthropic reasoning. The idea is that our observations are limited by the fact that we are observers. You exist. Therefore, your data comes from a world where it was possible for you to exist. This sounds tautological, but it has weight. It is the same principle used to explain why the physical constants of the universe are so perfectly adjusted for life. If they were not, no one would be here to realize it. Now apply that idea to time. You exist at a specific moment in history. That fact limits the types of universes you are likely to live in. And that is what makes the paradox disturbing. It turns your own existence into evidence against humanity's long future. But maybe that's too harsh. Maybe you're not a random sample. Maybe humans of the future will be born in such large quantities that this moment, our moment, will be a rounding error. Maybe 117,000 million is just the beginning. Maybe you are precocious and lucky. But how precocious? If there will be 1 trillion human beings, you are among the 0.0001% of all the people who will live. Is that statistically likely? Maybe not. But maybe you're not random. Maybe you are special. Or maybe you're being deceived by cognitive biases. The illusion that the present is always central. The desire to make sense of chaos. Or maybe the paradox is wrong. Maybe probability cannot predict destiny. But what if it is correct? The doomsday paradox does not claim anything for sure. It only raises a possibility. It does not say that the end will come soon, only that it is statistically more likely than we like to admit. And this changes our way of thinking. It raises questions that we rarely ask. Should we invest in far future technologies if most of the future may not exist? Should we move from growth to preservation? Should we prepare for the end instead of eternity? Or, on a more personal level, how long will your world last? What would you do with the time you have left? Some philosophers say the paradox fails due to reference class problems. What counts as human? Only terrestrial biology. Do post-human minds count? Consciousness uploaded to the cloud? What if humanity fragmented into billions of digital selves? Then 117,000 million would seem very few. Others suggest that the paradox is a misuse of statistics, and that sampling does not work like this when you're a part of the data. That being aware changes the framework. But the paradox does not need certainty, only doubt, and it has fulfilled its function when it whispers, "You may be living in the twilight, not in the dawn." But maybe that is not bad. Maybe it sharpens things. Maybe knowing that life is finite, that history can be short, makes this moment deeper, more fragile, more valuable. Maybe it takes you away from the clouds and takes you to the ground you walk on, to the hands you can hold, to the voices you can hear, to the small opportunities you still have to shape something. Because whether we're near the end or just at the beginning, you are here alive, thinking, being part of a mystery greater than any number. And maybe the paradox is wrong. Maybe we are just beginning. But even if it is true, you can still choose. What will you do with your place in line? The Black Swan Paradox. Imagine you are standing next to a calm lake at dawn. The surface is calm, crystalline, intact. You only see swans gliding, elegant, all white, all serene. Day after day, year after year, all the swans you have seen have been white. You start to believe it. All swans are white. You write it in books. You turn it into assumptions. You use it to predict the next swan and the next. You teach it. You trust it. Until one day, a single black swan glides on the water, effortlessly, silently real. And at that moment, everything you believed vanishes. The Black Swan Paradox is not a traditional logical paradox. It does not live in equations. It lives in assumptions. It hides behind expectations, the invisible scaffolding on which we build our reality and that then collapses it. The phrase comes from a time when Europeans believed with certainty that all swans were white. It was rooted in logic. All swans are white. This is a swan. Therefore, it is white. Then, in 1697, some explorers in Australia saw one, a black swan. Not metaphorical, literal. And so, without further ado, centuries of beliefs crumbled. But the deeper version of this paradox was developed by philosopher and risk analyst Nassim Nicholas Taleb. In his hands, the black swan became something much more powerful, a symbol of the unpredictable, of the invisible, of rare and high-impact events that, once they occur, seem obvious in retrospect, but were invisible until they arrived. Here is the paradox. The more often something happens, the more sure we are it will keep happening. But sometimes that same confidence blinds us to the very event that destroys everything. You observe swans every day. They're always white. Your certainty grows. But with each additional white swan, the danger also grows because you are more mired in illusion, sure, more vulnerable. And then a black swan appears. And it not only defies the rule, it breaks it. It changes the shape of knowledge itself. Black swan events are not common. That is the question. They are rare. But when they happen, they define an era. The attacks of September 11th, the collapse of the world markets in 2008, the COVID-19 pandemic, the world wars, the sudden technologies, the natural disasters, the human inventions. They arrive unexpectedly. They restructure the world. And then we look back and say, of course, the signs were there. We should have seen it coming. But we didn't because our tools, our models, our numbers, our stories are based on what has already happened, not what has yet happened. The Black Swan Paradox reminds us that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The fact that something has not happened yet does not mean it will not happen. In fact, it could be likelier than you think, because the mere fact of not seeing something can be a kind of blindness. We trust in calm. We believe the line will continue the same. We look at the graph and say, tomorrow will be like today. But then the curve curves and keeps curving until the future looks nothing like the past. Here is a deeper fear. It is not only that it surprises us. It is that we build our lives on illusions of security. Financial models ignoring infrequent collapses. Political systems that deny fragility. Cities built on fault lines. Expectations of permanence. When change is the only constant. We plan for average. We design for normal. We imagine a stable, predictable, consistent world. But history is not formed by average. It is formed by exceptions. Think about it this way. Imagine a turkey well fed each day by a kind farmer. Day after day, it is cared for, protected, fed, watered, and sheltered. Every day, the turkey feels safer. This farmer loves me. The turkey sees a pattern. Extrapolating, it was hiding inside the routine. Now think about your life, your work, your savings, your health, your relationships. Are you planning based on what usually happens? Or are you protecting yourself from what rarely happens? Most of us don't. We think in straight lines. But reality moves in crashes, in waves, in sudden turns. And the most dangerous thing is not what we see coming. It is what we don't even know to look for. But the paradox does not only refer to disasters. It also hides an opportunity, because not all black swans are dark. Some are bright. Unexpected love, sudden advances, a small company that changes the world, a child born in poverty who rewrites the future, a scientist in a laboratory who discovers a cure by chance. Black swans can be beautiful, and, as they are unexpected, they are often underestimated. We overlook them. We ignore them. We say that could never happen. And yet, it happens again and again. So, how do we live with the paradox? How do we navigate a world in which the most important events are those that we never see coming? Taleb offers a path. Anti-fragility. Don't just build things that withstand blows. Build things that get stronger thanks to them. Live in a way that you benefit from surprises. Prepare for volatility. Maintain humility in the face of what you don't know. Expect to be wrong and design thinking about recovery, because the paradox does not disappear. There will always be another black swan. The question is, will it destroy you or reveal something new to you? So you are back in front of the lake. The water is calm. The swans glide, white and perfect. But now you no longer trust what you see, not out of fear, but out of clarity, because you understand that the future is hidden in the places where you don't look. The paradox of the brain in a bucket. Close your eyes. Breathe. Now imagine as vividly as possible that everything around you is an illusion. Not figuratively, but literally. Your body, your room, the sky, the people you love, the ground under your feet. Everything has disappeared, and in its place is a glass bucket suspended in a laboratory. Silent, sterile, bright. Inside floats a single human brain, yours. It is kept alive thanks to a network of tubes, nutrients, and electrodes. And those electrodes are connected to a supercomputer that sends you signals, electrical impulses that perfectly replicate the sensory experience of being alive. Sight, touch, taste, memory, emotions, all the sensations you have had, all the thoughts, all the loves, all the disappointments, all simulated, all indistinguishable from what you used to call reality. And in this scenario, you have no idea because the brain, isolated in its bucket, has no way of detecting the deception. For it, everything seems real just like now. This is the paradox of the brain in a bucket, a modern reinterpretation of philosophical skepticism that goes back thousands of years. From Descartes' evil demon to Plato's shadows on the cave wall, it poses a question so simple it seems like a trap. How do you know that everything you experience is real? And if you cannot prove that your world is not a simulation, do you have the right to trust it? The paradox is not science fiction. It is philosophy, epistemology, the study of knowledge. It not only asks what you know, but how you know it and whether it is possible to know it. If your brain only responds to stimuli, electrical impulses, neuronal signals, and chemical responses, is your whole life not a pattern of reactions? And if those reactions can be duplicated perfectly by a machine, what difference is there between living in the world and living in a bucket? What is real? What is imaginary? Where is the line? Does it exist? Let's delve deeper. At this moment, your brain is interpreting signals from your eyes. Photons that bounce off surfaces, patterns of light and shadow. But you do not see the world. You see the signals that your brain constructs. When you taste through chemical signals. When we remember, we do it through the activation of neurons. We never interact directly with reality. We interpret it through a lens, a filter, and that filter can deceive us. We know it. Optical illusions, phantom limbs, hallucinations, false memories. We are not cameras. We are narrators. We construct the world from fragments. So, how do you know that this world is real? You do not know it, and you have never known it. Some philosophers say that it does not matter, that if the experience is internally coherent, consistent, meaningful, and navigable, then that is all we need. If the rules of the simulation behave in a predictable way, then, for all practical purposes, that is your world. Who cares if it is real, as long as it works? But others resist that. They say, no, reality matters. The truth matters. It must matter, or we are lost. Because if everything is a lie, a deception, what can we build? And what can we trust? What can we be? Here's an extra strange twist, because some scientists and technologists take the idea of the brain in a bucket seriously, not as philosophy, but as a possible truth. If consciousness is independent of the substrate, if minds can be simulated, then perhaps we are already living in a simulation. This is the simulation hypothesis that thinkers like Nick Bostrom popularized, and popularized by the idea that if simulated minds become common, then, statistically, it is more likely that you are a simulated mind than a real one. In other words, if there are millions of buckets and only a few real brains, it is most likely that you are in a bucket. Only you do not know it. But maybe the paradox is not about fear. Maybe it is about humility, because what it shows in a silent and relentless way is that we are trapped inside our minds, that our senses are not windows to the world, but shadows on the wall of a cave. And that reality is not a fact. It is a story, a hallucination that the brain accepts until it questions it. So now you are back in a vat, still dreaming, still floating. And perhaps, just perhaps, this very thought, this idea of the vat, also is part of the simulation. A way to keep your mind busy, to deceive yourself to feel intelligent without leaving the trap. Because that is the final limit of paradox. Even doubt can be simulated, even now, even this. So, where are you going from here? Are you trying to escape? Are you trying to prove that the world exists to validate your senses? Or do you accept the mystery, not with desperation, but with amazement? Perhaps it does not matter if the world is simulated or real. Perhaps what matters is what you do with it. If you live with curiosity, if you seek a meaning, if you create, if you choose love, even when you're not sure that the other person exists. Perhaps being the vat is no worse than being anywhere else. If the dream is lucid, if the dream is kind, if the dream is yours. The prisoner's dilemma. You and another prisoner are sitting in separate rooms. You have both been arrested for a crime. Nothing too serious, but serious enough to matter. There is not enough evidence to convict either of you unless one speaks. So this is the deal. If you both remain silent, you will each get a year in prison. If you betray the other and he remains silent, you are free and he gets 3 years. If you both betray each other, you each get 2 years. They have no way to communicate. You must decide alone. What do? You sit in silence, weighing all options. If the other prisoner remains silent, you can be free by betraying him. If the other betrays you, it is convenient to betray him too to avoid the most severe penalty. Betrayal is the dominant strategy. So you betray, and he does also. You both get 2 years, but you could have gotten away with 1. This is the prisoner's dilemma, a paradox that lies at the heart of decision-making, strategy, trust, and morality. It shows how rational self-interest can lead to worse outcomes for everyone. It is not about betrayal. It is about logic and the limits of logic when we face other minds. Because in isolation, your choice makes perfect sense. But together, you both lose. The paradox seems simple, but it lies at the base of economics, political science, ethics, and even evolutionary biology. Every time 2 parties must choose without knowing the other's move, the dilemma arises. 2 countries that manufacture weapons. 2 companies that set prices. 2 lovers who decide whether they should forgive. 2 neighbors who decide whether to cooperate on something uncomfortable yet important. Each one wants the best result. Each one fears betrayal. So they both act rationally, and they both suffer. It is called mutual defection, a perfectly logical tragedy. But what makes this a paradox is that logic betrays itself. The best individual strategy, betrayal, leads to the worst collective result. And the best collective result, mutual cooperation, is vulnerable to individual betrayal. So you are trapped. Rationality leads to ruin, and only trust, something illogical, emotional, even fragile, can save you. But the game eliminates trust. It isolates you. It strips you of your reputation, your promises, your relationships. It forces you to choose in the dark. That is the true test, not of strategy, but of character. What will you do when nobody ever knows? Game theorists have studied this dilemma exhaustively. When it is played only once, desertion almost always wins. But in repeated games, when players interact over time, cooperation can emerge. Strategies like tit for tat appear. Start cooperating, then copy what the other player did last time. This rewards cooperation and punishes betrayal without being vengeful. It is simple and it works. In tournaments, tit for tat systematically outperforms aggressive strategies. But only when there is memory. Only when the shadow of the future lengthens. When there is a tomorrow, people behave better today. But in unique games, where trust is blind and the movements of others are hidden, logic pushes us toward betrayal. So what does that mean for the world? It means that systems without memory or connection generate conflict. Anonymous actors, one-off agreements, interactions without feedback. They're the perfect terrain for the dilemma to win. But if we build relationships, if we create networks, reputation, history, we tilt the game, we incentivize cooperation. That is why communities are important. That is why institutions are important. That is why forgiveness is important. They make the future real. They change the rules of the game. But there is a deeper version of the dilemma. It does not involve prisoners. It involves you now every day. Your body is a collection of selfish cells, each trying to survive. And nevertheless, they cooperate. Because that cooperation leads to something bigger. To you, societies are also collections of individuals, each with their own desires, their own fears. But when they cooperate despite the incentive to defect, they build something bigger. Civilization, language, science, love, everything depends on acting against short-term gain. Everything depends on trusting the invisible. The paradox is a mirror. It shows you what logic cannot solve. It asks you, are you willing to lose a little so that others do not lose much? Are you willing to risk betrayal to preserve connection? Are you willing to act with integrity even when there is no reward? The prisoner's dilemma isn't about crime. It is about character. It is about the moment when all reasons tell you to leave, but you stay. Not because it helps you to win, but because it helps us win. And maybe that's not rational, but maybe that is what makes us human. So you sit in your room. You do not know what the other prisoner will choose. You do not know what the world will do. But you breathe, think, and choose. Not to betray, but to trust. Even when it costs you, even when nobody ever knows it. Because sometimes that is how the cycle breaks.